The crystal champagne flute shattered against marble flooring as 300 pairs of eyes turned toward the woman in the simple black dress. Gold digger, the word hissed through the ballroom like poison. Clara Bennett's hands trembled, her worst nightmare materializing in real time at the city's most exclusive charity gala. But before shame could swallow her whole, a firm hand wrapped around hers. Adrian Vaughn, billionaire, widower, father, stepped forward, his jaw set with quiet fury. "You want to know who she really is?" His voice cut through the silent room like steel. "Then let me tell you a story." Before we dive into how we got here, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all started. The smoke from the grill carried the scent of charcoal and cheap beef across the Henderson family's backyard, mixing with citronella candles and the particular sweetness of a Midwestern summer evening. Adrian Vaughn stood there in a faded Northwestern t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days, wielding a spatula like it was the most important tool he'd ever held. Which, considering he normally signed documents that moved millions of dollars with a flick of his wrist, was saying something. "Daddy, you're burning them again!" 8-year-old Emma Vaughn announced this with the brutal honesty only children possess, her gap-toothed grin visible even from across the lawn where she was attempting to teach the neighbor's golden retriever to high-five. "I am not burning them," Adrian called back, though he quickly flipped 3 patties that were definitely getting too dark on one side. "I'm creating a nice char. It's called technique, sweetheart." "It's called black, Daddy." Margaret Henderson, their host and one of the few neighbors who actually knew who Adrian was, laughed from her position near the drinks table. "She's got you there, Adrian. Maybe stick to building skyscrapers and let someone else handle the meat." "I've got it under control," Adrian insisted, though he turned the heat down when Margaret wasn't looking. Control. That was funny. Adrian Vaughn controlled a construction empire worth $1.2 billion. He controlled projects in 14 states. He controlled board meetings, investor calls, and the careers of 3,000 employees. But a backyard grill? That was apparently beyond his abilities. Still, he'd take this over another sterile business dinner any day of the week. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Sarah died, and in that time, Adrian had learned that money couldn't fill silence. It couldn't make the other side of the bed feel less empty or explain to an 8-year-old why mommy wasn't coming back from the hospital. What money could do was build walls, high ones, expensive ones, between him and the world that had taken his wife and left him stumbling through single fatherhood like a man learning to walk in the dark. So he'd simplified. Moved from the estate in Wilmette to a normal house in a normal suburb. Drove a 3-year-old Jeep instead of the Mercedes collecting dust in his garage. Showed up to neighborhood barbecues and pretended that burnt hamburgers mattered more than quarterly earnings reports. Most days, he almost believed it. "Mr. Vaughn, could you do me a favor?" Adrian turned to find Jim Morrison, no relation to the singer as he reminded everyone, holding up an empty propane tank with an apologetic shrug. "We've got another one in the garage. Want me to grab it?" Adrian was already setting down the spatula. "Nah, I got it. Just keep an eye on my brats, would you? They're in the pool, and my wife's inside dealing with her mother's phone call from hell." "Sure thing." Adrian glanced toward the above-ground pool where 3 kids were engaged in what appeared to be either water polo or attempted murder. It was hard to tell the difference. Emma had abandoned the dog and was now cannonballing with the best of them, her purple swimsuit flashing in the evening sun. The thing about watching other people's kids at a neighborhood party is that you can't really watch them. You just kind of exist in the general vicinity and hope nothing catastrophic happens. Adrian had learned this over the past year of suburban living, so he returned to the grill, kept one ear tuned to the pool sounds, and tried not to think about the stack of contracts sitting on his home office desk that actually required his attention. That's when he saw her. She was standing near the drinks table, partially hidden behind Margaret's elaborate setup of lemonade dispensers and sweating pitchers of iced tea. At first, Adrian thought she might be one of the teenagers hired to help serve, but something about the way she held herself, that particular stillness of someone trying not to be noticed, made him look twice. She wasn't young, maybe 30, give or take. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had given up trying to be neat somewhere around hour 6 of what was clearly a very long day. She wore jeans that were faded not from fashion, but from actual wear, and a green t-shirt that hung a little loose on a frame that suggested recent weight loss. Not the intentional kind. But it was her face that caught him. The way her eyes tracked the party with a mixture of longing and discomfort, like someone watching a life they used to know from the outside. Adrian recognized that expression. He'd worn it himself for 2 years straight. "That's Kelly's cousin," Margaret said, appearing at his elbow with a plate of raw burgers that needed grilling. "Clara something, just moved here from Pennsylvania, I think. Or maybe it was Ohio. Anyway, Kelly invited her. Felt bad that the poor thing's been holed up in that apartment for 2 weeks with nothing but job applications and ramen noodles." "Rough situation?" Margaret lowered her voice, though Clara was far enough away that there was no chance of overhearing. "Divorce. Bad one, from what Kelly says. Lost pretty much everything. House, savings, even her car got repossessed. She's been working 2 jobs just to make rent on Kelly's couch." "Kelly's couch? I thought Kelly had a 2-bedroom. "She does. The cousin insists on the couch. Won't take the spare room." Margaret shook her head. "Pride, probably. Or maybe she thinks it's temporary. People always think the hard times are temporary." Adrian watched Clara pour herself a lemonade with careful precision, like someone rationing resources. She took 1 sip, set it down, then seemed to debate whether taking another sip was allowed. "You should talk to her," Margaret said. "Why would I talk to her?" "Because you've been standing here watching her for 3 minutes like a sad puppy, and it's either charmingly concerned or deeply creepy depending on what you do next." Adrian felt his ears heat up. "I wasn't, go be useful. The burgers can survive 5 minutes without you hovering." Margaret literally pushed him away from the grill. Adrian had faced down hostile investors, cutthroat competitors, and his own father's disappointment when he'd chosen construction over law school. Walking across a backyard to talk to a lonely woman shouldn't have felt like scaling Everest. But it did. Clara was studying the dessert table with the focus of someone trying to solve a complex equation when Adrian approached. Up close, he could see the shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "The brownies are usually a safe bet," he said, keeping his voice casual. "But watch out for the cookies. Henderson's mom makes them, and she has some kind of vendetta against sugar." Clara's head snapped up, and for just a second, Adrian saw something like panic flash across her face before she managed a polite smile. "Thanks for the warning." "Adrian Vaughn." He held out his hand, then immediately felt like an idiot. Who shakes hands at a backyard barbecue? But Clara took it anyway. "Clara Bennett." Her grip was brief but firm. "You're the one burning the hamburgers." Despite himself, Adrian laughed. "My daughter told you that?" "I could smell it from here." "Ouch. Okay, fair enough." He grabbed a plate and loaded it with what he hoped was a not-burnt burger, some pasta salad, and chips. "Here, consider it my apology for the smoke." Clara stared at the plate like he'd just handed her a live grenade. "Oh, I already ate." It was such an obvious lie that Adrian almost called her on it. But something in her expression, that particular shame of not wanting to take what you desperately needed, made him pivot. "Well, I made way too many, and my daughter only eats the bun with ketchup, so this is literally going in the trash if you don't take it." Another lie, but a kind one. Clara hesitated for 3 long seconds before accepting the plate. "Thank you." "Don't thank me until you've tasted it. Might actually be carbon." The smallest hint of a genuine smile touched her lips, and Adrian felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. Not attraction, exactly. Or maybe it was, but buried under something else. Recognition, maybe. The particular loneliness of going through motions in a world that had stopped making sense. "So," he said, because apparently he was doing this now, "Margaret mentioned you just moved here?" Clara's smile flickered. "Yeah, 2 weeks ago, still getting my bearings." "What brought you to the thrilling metropolis of Riverside Heights?" "Family, and cheaper rent than Pennsylvania." She took a small bite of the burger, and Adrian tried not to notice the way her eyes closed briefly, like someone tasting real food after a long stretch of making do. "Let me guess. Philly?" "Pittsburgh. You know Pennsylvania?" "I've built there. Well, my company has." Adrian caught himself. This was the part where he usually deflected, changed the subject, kept the wall firmly in place. But something about the way Clara was trying so hard to look okay when she clearly wasn't made him want to be honest. "I run a construction company. We do commercial projects mostly. Office buildings, hospitals, that kind of thing." That sounds impressive. It's mostly paperwork and headaches. He grabbed a soda from the cooler, offered her one. She shook her head. What about you? What did you do in Pittsburgh? The question was a mistake. He saw it immediately in the way Clara's shoulders tensed, the way her fingers tightened on the plate. I was a teacher, she said quietly. 3rd grade. But the school district had budget cuts, and I was one of the newer hires, so she didn't finish the sentence. Adrian had heard enough incomplete sentences in his life to know when someone was protecting themselves from their own story. That's rough. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Clara took another bite of burger, clearly using it as an excuse not to talk. They stood there for a moment in the particular awkwardness of two strangers who had somehow stumbled past small talk into real territory too quickly. Around them, the party continued, kids shrieking in the pool, the Morrisons' teenage son attempting to impress someone with his terrible guitar playing, the sun starting its slow descent toward the horizon. Daddy, Daddy! Emma came barreling across the lawn, dripping wet and grinning like she'd just discovered fire. She crashed into Adrian's legs with the full-body enthusiasm of 8-year-olds everywhere. Em, you're soaking me! Mrs. Morrison said we can do sparklers when it gets dark. Can I, please? If Mrs. Morrison says it's okay. She already said yes, I'm asking you. Adrian looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, chlorine-red eyes, and the gap where her front tooth used to be. Fine. But you're following every safety rule, and if I see you waving one near your face, I know, you'll ground me until college. Emma rolled her eyes with the drama of someone who'd heard this lecture many times. Then she seemed to notice Clara for the first time. Hi, I'm Emma. My daddy's burning hamburgers. Emma. What? You are? Clara laughed. A real laugh this time, surprised out of her. I'm Clara, and your daddy already knows about the hamburgers. Good. Somebody has to tell him. Emma studied Clara with the unfiltered assessment of childhood. You look sad. Are you sad? Emma! Adrian felt his face burning. You can't just… It's okay, Clara said softly. She crouched down to Emma's level, and Adrian watched something shift in her expression, something gentler. I am a little sad, but this party is helping. Parties always help, Emma announced with absolute certainty, especially when there's cake. There is cake, right, Daddy? I'm sure Mrs. Henderson has cake. Okay, good. You should have some cake, Clara. Cake fixes everything. With that pronouncement, Emma spotted one of her friends and went tearing back toward the pool. Clara stood up slowly, watching Emma go with an expression Adrian couldn't quite read. She's wonderful. She's exhausting. But he smiled when he said it. And she has no filter whatsoever. I apologize for the sad comment. Don't. She's… Clara paused, choosing words carefully. She's right. Kids usually are. There was something in her voice, a particular ache that Adrian recognized, the sound of someone who'd lost more than she was saying. Before he could figure out how to respond, Margaret called out that it was time to eat, and the moment broke. Clara excused herself, drifting back to the edges of the party, where she clearly felt safer. Adrian returned to the grill, rescued the remaining burgers from carbonization, and tried to focus on the simple mechanics of neighborhood socializing. But he kept noticing her. The way she ate slowly, making the food last. The way she smiled at people but never quite joined conversations. The way she helped Margaret clean up without being asked, stacking plates and collecting trash with the efficiency of someone used to making themselves useful. You're staring again, Margaret murmured as she passed with a bowl of potato salad. I'm observing. Uh-huh. And what are your observations, Mr. Vaughn? Adrian didn't answer. Because what could he say? That he recognized the particular posture of survival? That watching Clara reminded him of those first months after Sarah died, when he'd moved through the world like a ghost, performing the actions of living without actually feeling alive. That for the first time in 3 years, he'd looked at someone and felt something other than numbness. The party stretched into evening. The sky turned from blue to purple to that particular indigo that happens just before dark. Someone brought out the sparklers, and Emma shrieked with delight, waving hers in careful circles while Adrian supervised with his phone ready to call 911 if necessary. He lost track of Clara for a while, caught up in sparkler management and helping Morrison fix the speaker that kept cutting out. But when he finally looked around, he spotted her on the far side of the yard, sitting alone on the Hendersons' porch swing. Adrian made a decision. Probably a stupid one, but he'd built a billion-dollar company on gut instinct, so maybe he could trust it now. He grabbed 2 bottles of water from the cooler and crossed the lawn. Clara looked up as he approached, and he saw her tense slightly, preparing to deflect, to smile politely and make some excuse to leave. But he sat down before she could, holding out one of the water bottles. Peace offering for my daughter's brutal honesty? Clara accepted the water. She was just being observant. That's a diplomatic way to put it. Adrian settled into the swing, setting it rocking gently. She gets that from her mother. Sarah used to say Emma could read people better than most adults. He'd said her name, Sarah, out loud, to a stranger. Adrian couldn't remember the last time he'd done that without his throat closing up. Clara was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Used to? She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." The words came out flat, factual. Adrian had learned that was the only way to say them. "I'm so sorry." "Yeah, me too." He took a drink of water, watched Emma chase fireflies with the Morrison kids. "It's been just Emma and me since then. We're figuring it out. Some days better than others." "She seems happy. That's something." "She is, mostly. She has her moments, though. Nights when she can't sleep. Days when she asks questions I don't know how to answer." Adrian wasn't sure why he was telling this to someone he'd met an hour ago. "But she's resilient. Kids are." "Are they? Or do they just not have a choice?" The question was sharp enough that Adrian turned to look at Clara. She was staring out at the yard, but her expression had gone somewhere distant. "I had a daughter," she said quietly. "Lily. She would have been 7 now." Would have been. Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. "Clara? Car accident 4 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light." Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. They gripped the water bottle tight enough that the plastic crackled. "My ex-husband was driving. He survived. Lily didn't. And somewhere in the grief and the blame and the guilt, our marriage just disintegrated." Jesus, Clara. "So when your daughter asked if I was sad," she finally looked at him, and her eyes were dry but haunted. "Yeah, I'm sad. I'm sad every single day. I just got really good at hiding it." They sat there in silence while the party continued around them. Emma's laughter carried across the yard. Someone had started playing music, something upbeat and summery that felt wrong and right at the same time. "I'm sorry," Adrian said finally. "That's inadequate, but I'm sorry." "Me too, for your wife, for Emma, for all of us walking around with these holes in our lives that nothing fills." Adrian understood then why he'd been drawn to her. It wasn't attraction, or at least not primarily. It was recognition, the particular gravity of grief that pulls like toward like. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said. "Sure." "Does it get easier? Everyone says it does, but..." She trailed off. Adrian thought about the question. Really thought about it. "No," he said finally. "It doesn't get easier. You just get better at carrying it. Some days it's a backpack, some days it's a boulder. But it's always there." "That's bleaker than I expected." "You wanted honesty." "I did." Clara almost smiled. "Thank you for that." They rocked in silence for a while, watching the party wind down. Parents were starting to collect their kids. Someone was boxing up leftover food. The sparklers had burned out, leaving the smell of smoke and metal in the air. "I should go," Clara said eventually. "Kelly's going to wonder where I disappeared to." "Okay." Adrian stood when she did. "For what it's worth, I'm glad Margaret made you come tonight." "Made me?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "She has a way of making things happen. You'll learn." Clara actually laughed at that. "I'll keep that in mind." She hesitated, then held out her hand again. "It was nice talking to you, Adrian. Really nice." He shook her hand, and this time the contact lasted a beat longer. "You too, Clara." He watched her find Kelly near the dessert table, saw the 2 women gather their things, and say goodbyes. Clara waved to Emma, who was half asleep in Morrison's arms, worn out from the pool and sparklers and general chaos of childhood. "So," Margaret appeared at his elbow, because apparently she'd developed teleportation powers. That looked intense. "We just talked." "Uh-huh. And?" "And nothing. She needed someone to talk to. I was there." "Right." Because you're known for your chatty nature and love of heart-to-hearts with strangers. Margaret's skepticism was palpable. Adrian started collecting paper plates, giving his hands something to do. "What do you want me to say, Margaret?" "I want you to say that you felt something, anything. Because, Adrian, you've been sleepwalking through life for 3 years, and tonight is the first time I've seen you actually present." "I'm present for Emma." "You're there for Emma. That's different." Margaret softened her tone. "I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying maybe it's okay to be alive again. Sarah would want that." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You didn't know Sarah." "No, but I know you, and I know you're not the kind of man who lives well in isolation." She squeezed his arm. "Just think about it, okay?" She left him with the paper plates and his thoughts. That night, after getting Emma bathed and into bed, after reading 3 chapters of their current book and singing the song Sarah used to sing, after finally getting her settled and asleep, Adrian found himself on his own back porch with a beer he wasn't really drinking. His phone buzzed. A text from his COO about the Portland project. Another from his lawyer about the contract dispute in Denver, the world of Vaughn construction, demanding his attention even at 10 p.m. on a Saturday. He ignored them both. Instead, he thought about Clara Bennett sitting alone at a party, trying to be invisible. About the weight of grief in her voice when she talked about her daughter. About the way she'd smiled at Emma with such careful tenderness, like someone handling something precious and breakable. He thought about Margaret's words, about being present versus being there. And he thought about the fact that for the first time in 3 years, he'd spent an evening talking to a woman and hadn't once wished he was somewhere else. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma's school, a reminder about Monday's field trip. Adrian pulled up his calendar. Board meeting at 9, conference call at 11. Site visit at 2. Dinner with investors at 7. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. This was real life. The construction empire he'd built from nothing. The 3,000 people depending on him for their livelihoods. The legacy he was building for Emma. Clara Bennett was a woman he'd talked to for an hour at a neighborhood party. She'd be gone from his thoughts by Monday. He almost believed it. But Sunday morning, when Margaret texted asking if he wanted to join her and Kelly for brunch next weekend, and Clara will be there, she needs to meet more people. Adrian stared at the message for a full 2 minutes before typing back. "Sure. What time?" Margaret's response was immediate. "Noon. And Adrian, wear something normal. You own a billion-dollar company, but you don't have to look like it every second." He smiled despite himself. Maybe sleepwalking wasn't the worst thing he'd been accused of. But maybe Margaret had a point about actually waking up. Emma wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, hair sticking up in 14 directions, looking for breakfast. Adrian made her pancakes, slightly burnt on one side, perfect on the other, and listened to her chatter about the sparklers and the pool and whether they could get a dog. "What about a goldfish?" he countered. "Daddy, goldfish are boring." "They're low maintenance." "So are you, but I still keep you around." Adrian nearly choked on his coffee. "Where did you learn that?" "Mrs. Morrison. She says it to Mr. Morrison all the time." "Remind me to thank her." But he was grinning. This was his life. Sunday morning pancakes and smart-mouthed daughters and the particular chaos of single parenthood. It was enough. It had to be enough. But Monday came, and with it the grind of meetings and emails and decisions that affected millions of dollars and thousands of lives. Adrian moved through it all with his usual efficiency, approving budgets, rejecting proposals, solving problems that most people would consider insurmountable. His assistant, Patricia, brought him lunch at 1 because he'd forgotten to eat breakfast. "You're distracted today," she observed. "I'm fine. You approved the Denver budget with a typo in it. You never miss typos." Adrian looked at the document in question. Sure enough, he'd initialed a report that listed costs as $3.4 million, when it clearly should have been $3.4 billion. "Fix it," he muttered. "Already done." But Adrian? Patricia had been with him for 8 years. She'd earned the right to speak freely. "Whatever's on your mind, handle it, because distracted you makes mistakes, and we both know we can't afford those." She was right. He was distracted. And the thing distracting him was the memory of Clara Bennett's sad eyes and the way she'd laughed at Emma's brutal honesty. It was ridiculous. He'd talked to her for maybe an hour total. She was dealing with her own grief, her own struggles. The last thing she needed was a billionaire with a daughter and a construction empire and enough emotional baggage to fill a warehouse. The last thing he needed was complications. But Friday came, and with it Margaret's brunch invitation, and Adrian found himself standing in front of his closet trying to decide between the Oxford shirt and the Henley, which was insane because it was just brunch. "The blue one," Emma announced from his doorway. "It makes your eyes look nice." "Since when do you have fashion opinions?" "Since always, you just don't listen." He wore the blue Henley. The restaurant Margaret had chosen was one of those trendy farm-to-table places that had sprung up in the revitalized downtown area. Adrian had actually built the mixed-use development it was housed in, which led to an awkward moment when the owner recognized him and tried to comp their meal. "Please don't," Adrian said quietly. "I'm just here for brunch with friends." The owner nodded understanding, but Adrian caught the speculative look. By tomorrow, there would be whispers. That's how it always worked. He couldn't exist anywhere without eventually being recognized, without his net worth preceding him like a neon sign. But then Clara walked in with Kelly, and for a moment, the weight of being Adrian Vaughn lifted. She dressed up slightly, jeans without holes, a green sweater that brought out her eyes, hair down instead of in a ponytail. She looked less exhausted than she had at the barbecue, though the shadows under her eyes suggested she still wasn't sleeping well. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. The particular awareness of two people who'd shared more than they intended. Emma, having zero chill, waved enthusiastically. "Clara, we're over here!" Clara smiled and waved back, and Adrian felt something in his chest loosen. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe it was okay to be alive again. Or maybe he was just setting himself up for another kind of hurt. But as Clara slid into the booth next to Kelly, and Emma immediately started telling her about the goldfish versus dog debate, Adrian decided he'd figure that out later. For now, this was enough. Sunday brunch with friends, burnt hamburgers in his recent past, and the tiniest possibility of something that felt almost like hope. Brunch lasted 3 hours, which was approximately 2 hours and 45 minutes longer than Adrian had planned. Emma had ordered chocolate chip pancakes and spent most of the meal trying to convince Clara that goldfish were, in fact, the most boring pets in existence. "But they're so quiet," Clara argued, playing along. "No barking at 3 in the morning. Exactly. They don't do anything. They just swim in circles looking confused. Some people find that relaxing. Some people are wrong." Adrian watched this exchange over his coffee, which had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Kelly and Margaret had their own conversation happening about some neighborhood drama involving a disputed property line, leaving him to observe the easy way Clara engaged with his daughter. She didn't talk down to Emma, didn't do that thing adults do where they perform interest while clearly wanting to be anywhere else. She actually listened, asked follow-up questions, laughed at Emma's terrible jokes. "What do you think, Daddy?" Emma turned to him suddenly. "You've been quiet." "I think you're relentless, and Clara's too polite to tell you that you've made your point about the goldfish." "I'm not too polite," Clara said. "I genuinely think this is an important debate." Emma beamed. "See? Clara gets it. Clara's humoring you." "No, I'm really not." Clara's eyes met his, and there was amusement there. Warmth. "I had this exact same argument with my ex-husband about getting Lily a puppy. I was team dog. He was team sensible pet that doesn't destroy furniture." The mention of her daughter shifted something in the air. Emma, with that uncanny kid radar for emotional weather changes, picked up on it immediately. "Who won?" she asked quietly. "Nobody. We compromised on a hamster named Theodore Roosevelt." Clara smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "He lived for 2 years and spent most of that time plotting escape attempts." "That's a really long name for a hamster." "Lily was very into presidents that year." Emma nodded seriously, processing this. Then she said, with the brutal directness of 8-year-olds everywhere, "My mom died too, 3 years ago." Adrian felt his stomach drop. "It's okay, Daddy. I'm just saying." Emma looked at Clara. "It sucks, right? When people try to tell you it gets better?" Clara's composure cracked just slightly. "Yeah, it really does. Mrs. Henderson told me that Mom's in a better place now, and I told her that the better place would be here with us, and she got all weird and quiet." "Emma, we've talked about this." Adrian said, though his voice came out rougher than intended. People don't always know what to say. I know, but it's still annoying. Emma turned back to Clara. Do people say dumb stuff to you too? All the time. Clara's voice was soft. The worst one is when they say everything happens for a reason. Yes! Emma practically shouted, causing several nearby tables to glance over. That one makes me so mad. What reason? What possible reason? Adrian watched Clara reach across the table and squeeze Emma's hand. Just for a second, but it was enough. There isn't one, Clara said simply. Sometimes terrible things just happen, and we have to figure out how to keep going anyway. Margaret and Kelly had gone silent, watching this exchange with careful expressions. Adrian knew what they were thinking, that this was heavy for brunch, that maybe they should change the subject. But Emma needed this, and maybe Clara did too. Okay, Emma said finally. I'm glad we agree about that, and about dogs being better than goldfish. I didn't actually agree about the dog thing. But you're going to, right? Clara laughed, and the moment passed. The conversation drifted to safer topics. Emma's school play, Kelly's new job at the library, Margaret's ongoing war with the neighborhood HOA about her garden gnomes. When they finally left the restaurant, the afternoon sun was bright enough to hurt. Adrian squinted against it, fumbling for sunglasses he'd forgotten in the car. That was really nice, Clara said as they stood on the sidewalk. Kelly had gone to get her car, and Margaret was helping Emma pick out a candy from the shop next door. Thank you for including me. Margaret did the including. I just showed up. Still, it was... She paused, choosing words. It was the most normal I've felt in a long time. Adrian understood that. The particular relief of an afternoon where grief existed but didn't consume everything. Yeah, I get that. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Two people who'd somehow stumbled into emotional intimacy without meaning to and weren't sure what to do about it. Emma's amazing, by the way, Clara said. You're doing something right. Most days I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly. I think that's what all parents feel. Did you feel that way? Clara looked away, watching traffic pass. Every single day, I was constantly worried I was doing it wrong, feeding her the wrong foods, being too strict or not strict enough, missing signs that something was wrong. Her voice got quieter. And then the one time it really mattered, I wasn't even there. I was at a teacher conference while my husband drove her to soccer practice, and some drunk asshole ran a red light. And just like that, every worry about organic snacks and screen time became completely meaningless. But, Clara, sorry, that got dark fast. She forced a smile. See, this is why I don't do well at social things. I'm all fun and lightness. You don't have to apologize for grief. Don't I? Everyone else seems to think there's an expiration date on it. Like, after a certain point, you're just being dramatic. Adrian thought about his father's words after Sarah's funeral. Time to move forward, son. Can't live in the past, as if grief operated on a schedule. Screw those people, he said. Clara blinked. What? Anyone who puts a timeline on how you're supposed to feel? Screw them. They don't know what they're talking about. A real smile crossed her face this time. That's remarkably blunt for someone who seems so put together. I'm really not. Put together, I mean. I just fake it well enough that people believe it. Aren't we all just faking it? Probably, but some of us have better costumes. Margaret emerged from the candy shop with Emma, who was clutching a bag of gummy bears like they were precious gems. Kelly pulled up in her ancient Honda Civic that sounded like it was held together by prayer and duct tape. Ready? Kelly called to Clara. Yeah, one sec. Clara turned back to Adrian. This was really nice. Maybe we could do it again sometime? I'd like that. Okay, good. She seemed about to say something else, then just settled for a small wave before heading to Kelly's car. Adrian watched them drive away, that rattling Honda disappearing into traffic. So, Margaret said, appearing at his elbow with her signature impeccable timing. That seemed to go well. It was brunch. We ate food. We talked. That's generally how brunch works. Uh-huh. And the part where your daughter and her daughter trauma bonded over pancakes? That was unexpected. But not bad? Adrian thought about the way Clara had looked at Emma, the understanding in her eyes. No, not bad. Good, because I'm organizing a movie night next Friday and Clara's coming, and you should come too. Margaret, don't Margaret me. You like her. She likes you. You're both walking around with matching wounds trying to pretend you're fine. Maybe stop pretending for 5 minutes and see what happens. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Clara was barely holding her life together. Because Adrian had a daughter to think about and a company to run and complications he didn't need. Because getting close to someone meant the possibility of losing them again, and he wasn't sure he could survive that twice. But he said none of that. Just, I'll think about it. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. Margaret smiled like she'd already won. I'll text you the details. The week that followed was chaos. The Portland project hit a snag when inspectors found code violations that weren't actually violations but required 3 days of meetings to prove. The Denver contract dispute escalated to the point where lawyers got involved, and Emma's school called to inform him that his daughter had gotten into an argument with another student about whether dinosaurs had feathers. They did have feathers, Emma insisted in the car ride home. There's evidence. I believe you. Then why did I get in trouble? Probably because you made Tyler Morrison cry. He started it by saying dinosaurs were just big lizards. And you ended it by calling him scientifically illiterate? Mrs. Chen taught us that word last week. I was using my vocabulary. Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache coming on. You can't call people names just because they're wrong about dinosaurs. Even if they're really, really wrong. Even then. Emma slumped in her seat, clearly unsatisfied with this answer. They drove in silence for a few minutes before she said, Is Clara coming to movie night? I don't know, maybe. You should ask her. Why should I ask her? Because you like her. Adrian nearly ran a red light. What? You like her, I can tell. You smile different when she's around. I smile the same way I always smile. Nope, your regular smile is like this. Emma demonstrated what could only be described as a polite grimace. But with Clara, it's like this. She showed an actual smile. See the difference? You're 8. You're not supposed to be analyzing my facial expressions. I'm observant. Mom always said so. The mention of Sarah hit Adrian in the chest the way it always did. Sharp and unexpected, even 3 years later. Yeah, she did say that. So are you going to ask Clara to movie night? Margaret already invited her. But you should ask her, like specifically, so she knows you want her there. When did you become a relationship expert? I watch a lot of TV while you're working. Emma said this with zero shame. Adrian sighed. His daughter had a point, which was annoying. I'll think about it. That's what you always say when you mean yes, but don't want to admit it. That's not... Adrian stopped. She was right. Fine. I'll text her. Tonight? When I get a chance. Tonight, Daddy, before you chicken out. He didn't text her that night, or the next day. Work consumed him. Meetings that ran long, problems that needed solving, decisions that couldn't wait. By Wednesday, he'd convinced himself it would be weird to text Clara out of nowhere. Margaret had already invited her. Clara would show up or she wouldn't. It didn't matter. Except it did matter, and he was absolutely chickening out, and Emma knew it. Did you text Clara? She asked Wednesday night at dinner. I've been busy. That's a no. I'm handling a crisis in Portland. 3 workers got injured on site because a contractor ignored safety protocols. Are they okay? 2 broken arms and a concussion. They'll recover, but it's serious, Em. I've had to deal with OSHA inspectors and lawyers, and I know your job is important, Daddy, but you're allowed to have a life too. Adrian looked at his 8-year-old daughter, who was supposed to be worried about homework and dinosaur arguments, not her father's emotional availability. When did you get so wise? He asked quietly. I've always been wise. You just don't listen. He texted Clara that night at 11 p.m. after Emma was asleep and he'd finished the OSHA paperwork and poured himself a whiskey he was too tired to drink. The message sat in his drafts for 10 minutes while he agonized over the wording. Finally, he just went simple. Hey, it's Adrian. Margaret's doing movie night Friday. You should come. Emma would love to see you again. He hit send before he could overthink it further, then immediately regretted the phrasing. Should he have mentioned Emma? Did that sound like he was using his daughter as an excuse? Should he have... His phone buzzed. Claire's response was almost immediate. I'd like that. What time? Adrian stared at the message, feeling something unfamiliar in his chest. Relief, maybe, or possibility. 7 p.m. Margaret's place. Fair warning, Emma's picking the movie, so prepare for either animated animals or dinosaurs. Sounds perfect. See you then. He set the phone down, picked up the whiskey, and allowed himself a small smile. Friday came faster than expected. Adrian spent the day distracted through another round of meetings, finally leaving the office early for the first time in months. Patricia actually did a double take when he announced he was leaving at 4. Are you feeling okay? She asked, touching his forehead in mock concern. I have plans. Plans that aren't work-related? Is that really so shocking? Adrian, you once canceled dinner with your own daughter to take a conference call from Tokyo. Yes, it's shocking. He winced at the memory. That had been 6 months ago, and Emma still occasionally brought it up when she wanted to guilt him about something. This is different. Different how? Just different. He grabbed his jacket. I'll have my phone if anything urgent comes up. Nothing is urgent enough to interrupt whatever this is, Patricia said firmly. Go. Live your life. We'll survive one evening without you micromanaging. Margaret's house was already chaotic when Adrian and Emma arrived. Kids ran through the hallways, someone had set up a popcorn machine in the kitchen, and Margaret herself was in full hostess mode, directing traffic and dispensing juice boxes with military precision. You came early, she said, sounding delighted. Emma was impatient, Adrian said, which was partially true. Emma had started getting ready 2 hours before they needed to leave. Claire's in the living room helping set up the projector, or trying to. Technology is not her strong suit. Emma was already gone, racing toward the living room before Adrian could stop her. He followed more slowly, suddenly nervous in a way that felt ridiculous for a man who regularly negotiated million-dollar contracts. Clara was indeed struggling with the projector, tangled in cords and looking adorably frustrated. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back in a messy bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. I swear, I'm not completely incompetent, she muttered, not looking up. This thing just hates me. Here, let me... Adrian stepped in, quickly identifying the problem. She'd plugged the HDMI into the wrong port. Try this. The screen flickered to life, and Clara looked at him with such genuine gratitude that Adrian felt his heart do something complicated. My hero, she said, and he couldn't tell if she was joking. Basic troubleshooting, not exactly heroic. You'd be surprised how many people can't even do that. She took off her reading glasses, and Adrian noticed how tired she looked. Sorry. Long week. Tell me about it. Portland's been a nightmare. The construction thing? He was surprised she remembered. Yeah, injuries on site, OSHA breathing down my neck, contractors pointing fingers at each other. That sounds incredibly stressful. It's part of the job. What about you? How's the job hunt going? Claire's expression shuddered slightly. It's going. I had 2 interviews this week. Both ended with, we'll let you know, which is code for no. I'm sorry. It is what it is. I'm overqualified for retail and underqualified for everything else, apparently. She forced a smile. But hey, at least I'm consistently getting rejected. That's something. That's not... Clara! Emma crashed into them with the subtlety of a small tornado. You came! Did you know we're watching The Land Before Time? It has dinosaurs? And it's sad, which are basically my 2 favorite things. Those are very specific favorites, Clara said, but she was smiling. I'm a specific person. Emma grabbed Clara's hand. Come sit with me. I already set up the good spot with extra pillows. Adrian watched his daughter drag Clara toward the makeshift seating area, chattering nonstop about dinosaur accuracy and animated films. Other families were arriving now, the Morrisons with their 3 kids, the Hendersons with their teenager who immediately disappeared into the basement, Kelly with a suspicious number of wine bottles. This should be interesting, Margaret murmured, appearing at Adrian's elbow again. You live for chaos. I live for bringing people together. The chaos is just a side effect. She handed him a beer. Relax. Enjoy the movie. Stop looking like you're about to negotiate a hostile takeover. I don't look like that. You absolutely do. You've got your boardroom face on. Adrian consciously tried to relax his expression, which only made Margaret laugh. "You're hopeless. Go sit with your daughter before she adopts Clara as her new favorite person." The movie started, and the living room descended into semi-darkness, broken only by the projector's glow. Emma had indeed claimed the best spot, a corner of the sectional with enough pillows to build a fort. She'd positioned herself between Adrian and Clara, clearly pleased with her arrangement. 10 minutes into the movie, Emma was already tearing up. "Littlefoot's mom is going to die, isn't she?" "Spoilers, Em," Adrian whispered. "Everyone knows that part. It's like the whole point of the movie." Clara passed Emma a tissue. "It's okay to cry at sad parts. I always do." "Really? Even as a grown-up?" "Especially as a grown-up. We just pretend we're not crying and blame it on allergies." Emma giggled through her tears. "That's what Daddy does." "I do not," Adrian started, but both Emma and Clara were looking at him with matching skeptical expressions. "Fine. Sometimes." "All the time," Emma corrected. By the time Littlefoot's mother died on screen, half the room was crying, including several parents who probably thought they were prepared for this. Adrian glanced over and saw Clara wiping her eyes, not even trying to hide it. Their eyes met in the darkness, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or just the shared acknowledgement that sometimes kids' movies hit harder when you'd actually lost someone. Emma fell asleep somewhere around the middle of the film, her head on Adrian's shoulder, one hand still clutching the tissue Clara had given her. The weight of her was familiar and grounding, this small person who'd somehow kept him tethered to the world when everything else felt impossible. "She's out," Clara whispered. "Happens every time. She fights sleep like it's the enemy, then crashes hard." Lily was like that too, insisted she wasn't tired right up until she face-planted into her dinner. Adrian smiled at the image. "You don't talk about her much." "Lily. It's hard. People get uncomfortable." Clara pulled her knees up to her chest, watching the movie without really seeing it. Or they want to fix it somehow. Offer solutions that don't exist. What do you wish they'd do instead? Just let me talk about her. Let her be real, even though she's gone. Clara's voice was barely audible over the movie. "I'm so afraid I'll forget things. The way she laughed, how she mispronounced spaghetti until she was 6, the exact shade of her eyes." "You won't forget." "How do you know?" "Because those things are burned in. Trust me, it's been 3 years, and I can still hear Sarah singing off-key in the shower. Still smell her perfume sometimes, even though I threw out all the bottles. Still reach for my phone to text her something funny before I remember." Clara turned to look at him fully. "Does that get easier?" "The remembering? No. But eventually it hurts less, becomes more sweet than painful." Adrian adjusted Emma's weight against him. "You'll get there." "I'm not sure I want to. If it stops hurting, doesn't that mean I've let her go?" Adrian had asked himself that same question 1,000 times. "I think it means you're healing, and healing doesn't mean forgetting." They watched the rest of the movie in companionable silence. Around them, other families chatted quietly. Kids whispered and giggled. Someone's baby cried briefly before being soothed. Normal Friday night chaos. But Adrian felt strangely peaceful. Emma asleep on his shoulder, Clara beside him, the weight of the week finally lifting. When the credits rolled and lights came up, the living room dissolved into the organized chaos of families gathering their things. Adrian carefully transferred Emma to his arms, and she mumbled something incomprehensible before settling back into sleep. "Need help?" Clara asked. "I've got her. Years of practice." He stood, cradling Emma easily. "You heading out?" "Kelly's my ride, so whenever she's ready." Clara hesitated. "This was really nice. Thank you for inviting me." Emma insisted. "Just Emma?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Adrian could deflect, make a joke, keep the walls firmly in place. Instead, he said, "No, not just Emma." Clara's smile was soft and genuine. "Good, because I had fun, and I'd like to do this again. The hanging out thing, if you're interested." "I'm interested." "Okay, good." She was nervous, he realized, just as uncertain about this as he was. They stood there in Margaret's living room with its scattered popcorn and forgotten juice boxes, Two damaged people trying to figure out if they were brave enough to try something that felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. "Clara!" Kelly called from the hallway. "Ready when you are." "Coming," Clara called back. Then to Adrian, "I should go." "Yeah, me too. This one's going to be impossible to wake up tomorrow. Good luck with that." Clara reached out and gently touched Emma's hair, a gesture so tender it made Adrian's chest ache. "She's really special, Adrian." "I know." "So are you." Before he could respond, Clara was gone, following Kelly out into the night. Adrian stood there holding his sleeping daughter, feeling like something had shifted but unsure exactly what. "That looked promising," Margaret said, materializing from nowhere as usual. "You were watching?" "This is my house. I watch everything." She started picking up abandoned cups. "So? Are you going to ask her out properly or keep pretending this is all casual?" "Margaret, I'm just saying, life's short. You of all people know that." Adrian looked down at Emma's peaceful face. "It's not that simple. I have her to think about. And Emma clearly adores Clara, so what's the real problem?" The real problem was fear. Fear of losing someone again, fear of letting Emma get attached to someone who might disappear, fear of being happy and having it ripped away. But he didn't say any of that, just, "I need to get her home. Thanks for tonight." "Adrian." "I know. I'll figure it out." He would. Eventually. Maybe. The drive home was quiet. Emma still asleep in the back seat. Adrian's mind replayed the evening, Clara's laugh, the way she'd cried at the movie without shame, how she'd looked at him when she asked if he was interested. He parked in the driveway and carefully carried Emma inside, navigating the dark house with practiced ease. Got her into pajamas without fully waking her, tucked her in with the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. "Love you, Daddy," she mumbled. "Love you too, sweetheart." He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her sleep. This was what mattered, this small person who trusted him completely. Whatever decisions he made about Clara or anyone else had to start there. His phone buzzed as he headed to his own room, a text from an unknown number that he quickly realized was Clara. "Kelly gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thanks again for tonight. It felt good to feel normal for a few hours." Adrian stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. He could keep this casual, friendly, safe. Or he could be honest. "It felt good for me too. We should do something. Just us, maybe. If you want." He hit send before he could overthink it, then immediately panicked. Too much? Not enough? Should he have... The phone buzzed. "I'd like that." "When?" Adrian smiled in the darkness of his bedroom. "Tomorrow? There's a place that does the best burgers you've ever had. Assuming you can handle more of my questionable cooking recommendations. Your track record is 50-50, but I'm willing to take the risk. Pick you up at 6? It's a date." Adrian set the phone down, heart pounding in a way that felt both terrifying and right. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe life was too short to keep playing it safe. Or maybe he was setting himself up for disaster. But as he lay in bed, unable to sleep, all he could think about was Clara's smile and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to want something for himself again. Tomorrow would be complicated. Work would demand his attention. Emma would need him. The world would keep spinning with all its problems and responsibilities. But tomorrow night, he had a date. And for the first time in 3 years, Adrian Vaughn felt something that resembled hope. Adrian woke up the next morning to Emma sitting on his chest, staring at him with the intensity of someone conducting a scientific experiment. "You have a date," she announced. "How do you—" He squinted at the clock. 6:30 a.m. "Were you going through my phone?" "It was on the counter. The screen lit up. I happened to see it." Emma's attempt at innocence was undermined by her enormous grin. "With Clara." "That's called invasion of privacy. That's called you left your phone where I could see it." She bounced slightly, making his ribs ache. "Are you nervous?" "I'm tired. Get off me." "You didn't answer the question." Adrian groaned and sat up, dislodging his daughter. "Yes. Fine. I'm nervous. Happy?" "Why? You like her. She likes you. That's how dating works." "When did you become an expert on dating?" "I told you. TV. Also, Sophia Morrison's sister is in high school and she tells us stuff during carpool." "Great. I'm getting relationship advice from an 8-year-old who's getting it from a teenager. Sophia's sister knows things, Daddy. She's had 3 boyfriends. She's 16. That's concerning, not impressive. Emma rolled her eyes. The point is, you need to not be weird tonight. I'm not weird. You're super weird. Remember when you tried to help at my bake sale and you talked to Mrs. Chen for 20 minutes about building codes? She asked about my work. She asked how you were. Normal people say fine and move on. You gave her a presentation. Adrian threw a pillow at her. Emma shrieked with laughter and ran out of the room, leaving him alone with his thoughts and growing anxiety about the evening ahead. He hadn't been on a date since Sarah. Hadn't wanted to. The few times well-meaning friends had tried to set him up, he'd found excuses. Work. Emma. Exhaustion. The truth was simpler and more complicated. He hadn't been ready. He still wasn't sure he was ready now, but he'd said yes. Clara had said yes. So ready or not, he was doing this. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Adrian tried to focus on work, reviewing contracts, answering emails, dealing with the ongoing Portland situation, but his mind kept drifting. What did people even do on first dates anymore? Dinner and a movie felt too formal. Coffee felt too casual. He'd suggested burgers, which seemed safe, but now he was second-guessing everything. You're spiraling, Patricia observed at 2 p.m., catching him staring blankly at his computer screen. I'm fine. You've read the same email 4 times without responding. You're not fine. She sat down across from him. What's going on? Adrian debated deflecting, then gave up. Patricia had been with him long enough to see through his bullshit anyway. I have a date tonight. Her eyebrows shot up. A date? Like an actual date? Is there another kind? With who? A woman I met, Clara. It's new. Patricia's expression softened. Adrian, that's wonderful. Is it? Because I feel like I'm about to throw up. That's normal. First date after... She paused delicately. It's a big step. Yeah. Adrian ran his hands through his hair. What if I've forgotten how to do this? What if I'm terrible at it? What if... Stop. You're overthinking. Patricia leaned forward. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to leave here at 4, go home, spend time with Emma, and then you're going to show up and be yourself. That's it. No grand gestures, no trying to be someone you're not. Just you. What if just me isn't enough? Then she's not the right person, but something tells me she already knows who you are, and she said yes anyway. Adrian wanted to believe that. Thanks, Patricia. Anytime. Now get out of here. I'll handle the Portland calls. You don't have to. I absolutely do. Because if you stay, you'll just stress spiral until you talk yourself out of this. She shooed him toward the door. Go. Have fun. Remember what that feels like. Adrian left the office at 3:30, making it home in time to find Emma already planning his outfit. Not the blue shirt, she said, vetoing his first choice. You wear that to meetings. This is a date. What's wrong with the blue shirt? It's boring. Wear the gray one, the soft one. Since when do you have opinions about my clothes? Since always. You just never listen. Emma pulled the gray Henley from his closet. This one, with the jeans that aren't dad jeans. All my jeans are dad jeans. I'm literally a dad. The dark ones, not the ones with the weird pockets. Adrian surrendered to his daughter's fashion authority and went to shower. When he emerged, Emma had laid out his entire outfit, including socks, which felt excessive, but he wasn't going to argue. What am I going to do with you tonight? He asked, toweling his hair. Margaret said I could sleep over. She's making pizza and we're watching movies. You already arranged this? I'm proactive. Emma grinned. Plus, I figured you might want privacy for the goodnight kiss. There's not going to be a... Adrian stopped. You're 8. You shouldn't even know about goodnight kisses. Sophia's sister says, I don't want to know what Sophia's sister says. By 5:30, Adrian was dressed and ready and absolutely not pacing in his living room while Emma watched with barely concealed amusement. You look nice, Daddy. Thanks, sweetheart. Don't forget to ask her questions about herself, girls like that. Where are you getting this information? Around. Emma hugged him suddenly. I hope you have fun. You deserve to have fun. Adrian held his daughter close, feeling the weight of her words. 8 years old and already worried about whether her father was happy. I love you, Em. Love you too. Now go pick up your girlfriend before you're late. She's not my girlfriend. Not yet, Emma said, with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how this story would end. Adrian dropped Emma at Margaret's, endured approximately 7 minutes of Margaret's advice about first date etiquette, and finally escaped to his car. Clara lived in a modest apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind of place with peeling paint and a parking lot full of cars held together by hope and determination. He texted when he arrived, "Here whenever you're ready." She emerged 3 minutes later, and Adrian felt his breath catch. She'd left her hair down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple green dress that matched her eyes and a denim jacket that had seen better days. No jewelry except small silver earrings. Minimal makeup. She looked beautiful and real and absolutely terrified. "Hi," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Hi. You look great." "You too. Is this weird? This feels weird." "Extremely weird," Adrian admitted, and they both laughed nervously. The burger place he'd chosen was a hole-in-the-wall joint called Smoky's that had been around since the 70s and looked it. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, walls covered in vintage Coca-Cola signs, and local sports memorabilia. The kind of place that served exactly 3 things: burgers, fries, and milkshakes, but did them perfectly. "This is very different from what I expected," Clara said as they slid into a booth. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Somewhere fancier?" "You're a billionaire?" She stopped, face flushing. "Sorry, that sounded like you did basic research on the guy you're having dinner with." "That's not weird, Clara. That's smart." "I may have Googled you. A little." "Okay, a lot." She buried her face in the menu. "Kelly showed me articles. You've built some incredible things." Adrian shifted uncomfortably. This was always the awkward part. The moment when people learned about his net worth, and everything changed. "Yeah, well, none of those buildings make a burger like Smoky's." "Is that your way of changing the subject?" "Absolutely." A waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the restaurant opened appeared with waters and a bored expression. "What'll it be?" "2 smoky specials, extra pickles on hers, none on mine, 2 orders of fries, and a chocolate shake and a—" Adrian looked at Clara. "Strawberry," she said. "Strawberry shake." The waitress scribbled this down and vanished without comment. "Extra pickles?" Clara asked. "You mentioned liking them at the barbecue, when you were fixing your burger. You remembered that?" "I remember a lot of things." They fell into silence, both suddenly fascinated by the tabletop. Around them, Smoky's hummed with its usual Saturday evening crowd, families, teenagers on dates, old men nursing coffee at the counter. "So," Clara said finally, "we're doing this. Actually doing this." "Apparently. Are you as terrified as I am?" "Probably more." Adrian folded his napkin into increasingly smaller squares. "I haven't done this since before Emma was born. I haven't done this since my marriage fell apart, which wasn't exactly a confidence booster in the dating department." "How long were you married?" 6 years. Together for 8. Clara's fingers traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass. "We met in college, got married too young, had Lily too fast, and then spent years trying to pretend we were happy when we weren't." "What changed?" "She died." Clara's voice went flat. "Lily. After that, there was nothing left to pretend for. We blamed each other, ourselves, everyone and no one. Turns out shared grief doesn't bring you closer. It just shows you all the cracks that were already there." Adrian understood that better than he wanted to. "Sarah and I were lucky. We had good years before she got sick. But watching her die—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "It changes you. Makes you realize how fragile everything is." "Do you think about her? Still?" "Every day. Some days it's background noise, some days it's the loudest thing in my head." He met Clara's eyes. "Does that bother you?" "No, it would bother me if you didn't." Clara leaned back as the waitress delivered their shakes. "I think about Lily constantly. What she'd look like now. What grade she'd be in. Whether she'd still love dinosaurs or if she'd have moved on to something else. Emma still has the stuffed triceratops Sarah bought her when she was 3. Sleeps with it every night. Lily had a bunny, pink with one ear that never stood upright. My ex kept it after the divorce. I didn't fight him for it because she stopped, swallowing hard. Because touching it hurt too much. I kept Sarah's wedding ring, Adrian said quietly, in a box in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take it out and just hold it. Emma doesn't know. Why don't you tell her? Because she's 8. She doesn't need to know her dad sometimes sits in his office crying over jewelry. I think she probably already knows you're sad sometimes. Kids aren't stupid. No, they're really not. The burgers arrived, massive things that required 2 hands and 0 dignity to eat properly. Clara took one look at hers and laughed. This is obscene. This is Smokey's. Subtlety is not their forte. Adrian demonstrated the proper technique. Paper napkins tucked into collar, full commitment to the mess. You just have to embrace it. Clara watched him for a moment, then did the same, and they ate in comfortable silence punctuated by occasional comments about the food, which was exactly as good as Adrian had promised. Okay, Clara said around her 3rd bite. This might actually be the best burger I've ever had. Told you. Your track record is improving. First, the backyard barbecue burgers. Questionable. Now this, exceptional. The barbecue burgers weren't that bad. Adrian, they were black on one side. That was technique. That was burning. But she was smiling, really smiling, and Adrian felt something in his chest unknot. They talked easier after that. About Emma's school and her dinosaur obsession and the ongoing goldfish debate. About Clara's job search and the particularly brutal interview she'd had at an insurance company where they'd asked her to explain the 3-year gap in her resume. I told them the truth, Clara said, that I'd lost my daughter and fallen apart for a while. The interviewer literally didn't know what to say, just stared at me like I'd announced I had a contagious disease. People are terrible at handling grief. The worst part is I get it. Nobody wants to hire the sad woman who might break down crying at her desk. But I'm not that person anymore. Or I'm trying not to be. What kind of work do you want to do? Clara shrugged. Teaching was everything to me. But going back to a classroom, being around kids all day, she trailed off. I'm not ready for that. Maybe I never will be. So what then? I don't know, something that pays the rent, something that doesn't make me feel like a complete failure. She laughed without humor. The bar is pretty low right now. Adrian thought about his company, the hundreds of positions in accounting and HR and admin. He could make a call, get her an interview, probably get her hired. But something stopped him. The memory of how Sarah had hated when he tried to fix everything. How she'd wanted to fight her own battles, even when he had resources that could help. So instead he said, you'll figure it out. You're smart, you're capable, and you showed up to a job interview and told the truth even when lying would have been easier. That's not failure. That's stupidity. That's integrity. There's a difference. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You're very good at this. At what? Saying the right thing, making people feel better. I'm really not. Ask anyone who works for me. I'm terrible at pep talks. You're good at it with me. Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. You should check that, Clara said. Could be Emma. It wasn't Emma. It was his father. Need to discuss the Denver situation. Call me tomorrow. Adrian shoved the phone back in his pocket. Everything okay? Clara asked. Just work. It can wait. Are you sure? If you need to, Clara, I'm here with you. Work can wait. Something shifted in her expression. Most people don't do that. Put their phone away. Most people aren't on a date with you. The words hung between them, and Adrian realized he'd said exactly what he was thinking without filtering it. Claire's cheeks flushed pink, and she looked away, but she was smiling. They finished their burgers and split a piece of pie that the waitress insisted they try, and by the time they left Smokey's, the sun had set and the temperature had dropped to that perfect cool that made you want to stay outside. What now? Clara asked as they stood in the parking lot. Adrian hadn't planned beyond dinner. He probably should have. But planning felt wrong somehow, like trying to script something that was better left unscripted. There's a park a few blocks from here, he said, walking path around a lake. It's nice at night. That sounds good. They drove separately to the park and met at the trailhead. The path was lit by old-fashioned lampposts that created pools of yellow light every 50 feet. A few other people were out, joggers, dog walkers, a couple of teenagers making out on a bench. They walked slowly, not touching, hands in pockets. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said after a while. "Sure. Why me? You could have your pick of anyone. Why ask out the broke, divorced woman with a complicated past?" Adrian thought about how to answer that. "You want the honest answer?" "Always. Because you're the first person in 3 years who made me feel something other than numb. Because when you talk about your daughter, I see someone who understands what it's like to love something so much that losing it breaks you. Because at that barbecue, you were trying so hard to be invisible, and I wanted you to be seen." Clara stopped walking. "Adrian, your turn. Why say yes to me?" "Because you're kind. Because you see people. Because when Emma asked if I was sad, you didn't try to shut her up or change the subject. You let her be honest." Clara's voice got quieter. "And because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to pretend I'm okay when I'm not." They stood there under a lamppost, facing each other, the sounds of the park distant and unimportant. "This is terrifying," Clara whispered. "Yeah, it really is. I don't know how to do this. How to care about someone again. What if I screw it up?" "Then you screw it up. What if I do?" "Then you do." Adrian laughed. "That's a terrible pep talk." "I told you, I'm not good at this." "Neither am I." They started walking again, and this time, somehow, their hands found each other. It was awkward at first, fingers not quite knowing how to fit together, both of them hyper-aware of the contact. But after a few steps, it felt right. They circled the lake twice, talking about everything and nothing. Clara told him about growing up in Pittsburgh, about her parents who'd retired to Florida and called once a month with weather updates, about teaching 3rd grade and how she'd loved the chaos of it, the way kids were honest in ways adults had forgotten how to be. Adrian told her about building his company from the ground up, about the risks that had paid off and the ones that hadn't, about the pressure of being responsible for thousands of employees and their families, about how success had felt empty when Sarah got sick, how all the money in the world couldn't buy more time. "Do you ever wish you'd chosen differently?" Clara asked. "Spent more time with her instead of building the company?" "Every day, but I also know she wanted me to build it. She believed in it, in me. So I keep going, partly for Emma, partly because stopping feels like I'd be giving up on what Sarah and I started together." "That's beautiful, in a sad way. Most beautiful things are sad if you look close enough." They completed their 3rd lap around the lake and found themselves back at the parking lot. It was almost 10. Adrian knew he should probably drive Clara home, end the evening on a high note, not push his luck. But he wasn't ready for it to end. "There's a diner near here," he said. "Open 24 hours, makes terrible coffee and decent pie." "Didn't we just eat pie?" "That was dinner pie. This would be evening pie, completely different category." Clara laughed. "Is this how you normally extend dates? Proposing multiple rounds of dessert?" "I don't know. I haven't been on a date in over a decade. I'm making this up as I go." "Well, you're doing pretty good." She squeezed his hand. "Okay, evening pie, but I'm buying." "You don't have to." "Adrian, you paid for dinner. Let me buy pie." They drove to the diner, a classic aluminum-sided place called Rosie's that looked like it had been transplanted from the 1950s. The coffee was indeed terrible, burnt and weak simultaneously, which seemed impossible, but there it was. The pie was apple and still warm, served with vanilla ice cream that was starting to melt. "Tell me about Emma," Clara said, cutting into her pie. "What was she like as a baby?" "Loud. Demanding. Slept maybe 4 hours a night for the first year." Adrian smiled at the memory. "Sarah used to joke that we'd created a tiny dictator, but she was also incredible. These huge eyes that just looked at everything like it was magic." "Does she remember her mom?" "Some things. More feelings than specific memories, I think. She knows Sarah loved her. That's what matters." "Do you talk about her? Sarah, I mean, with Emma?" "Sometimes. When Emma asks. I don't want to force it, but I don't want her to think it's forbidden either." Adrian pushed ice cream around his plate. "The grief counselor I took Emma to said kids process loss differently than adults, that she might seem fine for months and then randomly fall apart." "Has she fallen apart?" "Last year on Sarah's birthday, she locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out for hours. When I finally got her to talk, she said she was afraid she was forgetting what her mom looked like." Adrian's throat tightened at the memory. I showed her every photo we had, every video. We spent the whole night just remembering Sarah together. That's a good dad move. I felt completely helpless, like I was failing her. But you weren't. You showed up. You were there. Clara's eyes were bright. That's all kids really need, someone who shows up. They sat in the diner until almost midnight, watching the late-night crowd filter in and out. Shift workers grabbing dinner, insomniacs seeking coffee, teenagers with nowhere else to go. The waitress refilled their terrible coffee 3 times without comment. Finally, Clara yawned, tried to hide it, and failed. I should get you home, Adrian said. Probably. Kelly's going to want a full report. Margaret's going to interrogate me tomorrow. Are we going to pass? I think we did okay. They drove back to Clara's apartment complex, and Adrian walked her to her door like this was 1955, and he was a gentleman caller. Clara's apartment was on the 2nd floor, accessed by an exterior staircase that creaked ominously. This is me, Clara said, stopping at a door with peeling paint and a crooked number 3. This is you. They stood there in the yellow porch light, moths circling overhead, the sounds of other people's lives filtering through thin walls, television noise, a baby crying, someone laughing. I had a really good time, Clara said. Me too. Can we do this again? I'd like that. Okay, good. Clara was nervous again, Adrian could tell, fidgeting with her keys. So I'll just... He kissed her before he could talk himself out of it. Just a soft press of lips, nothing dramatic, over almost before it began. When he pulled back, Clara's eyes were wide. Sorry, Adrian said, though he wasn't. I should have asked first. No, that was... Clara touched her lips, looking stunned. That was good. Really good. Yeah? Yeah. She smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Emma was right about the goodnight kiss. Emma told you about... She texted me earlier, said you'd probably chicken out and I should be prepared to make the first move. Adrian groaned. I'm going to have a serious talk with my daughter about boundaries. Don't. She's perfect. Clara kissed him this time, just as soft and brief as his. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Clara. He waited until she was inside before heading back down the stairs, feeling like a teenager, like someone who'd just discovered gravity worked differently than he thought. The drive home was a blur. When he got there, Margaret's car was in his driveway, meaning Emma was already home and probably still awake despite the late hour. Sure enough, he found both of them in the living room, Emma in her pajamas, Margaret drinking tea like this was a perfectly normal time for a visit. How'd it go? Emma asked immediately. It went well. Did you kiss her? Emma? Margaret asked me the same thing. I absolutely did not, Margaret said, not even trying to sound convincing. Adrian looked at his daughter and his nosy neighbor and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just happiness, possibility, the sense that maybe life could be more than just going through motions. Yes, he said, I kissed her. And yes, before you ask, I'm seeing her again. Emma squealed and launched herself at him. Margaret smiled into her tea. About time, she murmured. That night, after Emma was finally asleep and Margaret had extracted every detail she could before leaving, Adrian sat on his back porch with a beer and his phone. He had messages, work emergencies that weren't really emergencies, his father's continued insistence on discussing Denver, Patricia checking in. He ignored all of them and texted Clara instead. Made it home. Emma approves, by the way. Kelly approves too. Says you're a keeper. Is that your opinion or Kelly's? Both. Definitely both. Adrian smiled at his phone like an idiot, feeling young and old at the same time. When can I see you again? Tomorrow? Emma has a game at 2. You could come if you want. Fair warning, 8-year-old soccer is basically chaos with occasional kicking. Clara's response came fast. I'd love to. Text me the details. He did, and then they texted for another hour about nothing important. Favorite movies, whether pineapple belonged on pizza, the ongoing goldfish debate. Silly things, easy things, the kind of conversation that mattered because it didn't matter. When Adrian finally went to bed at 2 a.m., he felt lighter than he had in years. He was falling for Clara Bennett, falling for her resilience, her honesty, her willingness to be broken in front of him, falling for the way she saw him, not the billionaire, not the success story, just Adrian, a man trying his best, a father who loved his daughter, someone who understood what it meant to keep going when everything felt impossible. It was terrifying and right, and probably too fast, but Adrian was done being careful, done protecting himself from feeling anything. Life was short. Sarah had taught him that. And if he'd learned anything from losing her, it was that love, even complicated, messy, imperfect love, was worth the risk. Tomorrow, Claire would watch Emma play soccer. They'd probably grab lunch after. Maybe take Emma to the park. Start building something that looked like a life. But tonight, Adrian let himself simply feel hopeful. And that, he thought as sleep finally claimed him, was enough. The next 3 months unfolded like something Adrian hadn't dared to imagine. Not perfect. Nothing ever was. But real in a way that made the hard parts worth it. Clara came to Emma's soccer game that Sunday and cheered louder than any of the other parents when Emma accidentally scored on her own team's goal. She didn't try to pretend it wasn't a disaster, didn't offer hollow encouragement. She just laughed with Emma about it afterward over ice cream, and somehow that made it okay. They fell into a rhythm. Dinners at Smokey's became a Tuesday tradition. Saturday mornings, Clara would show up at Adrian's house with coffee and bagels, and they'd all have breakfast together before Emma's various activities. Some evenings, after Emma was asleep, Adrian would drive to Clara's apartment and they'd sit on her tiny balcony talking until midnight. It wasn't smooth. Clara had bad days where the weight of everything made it hard for her to get out of bed, and Adrian learned to recognize the signs, the shorter texts, the forced cheerfulness in her voice. He'd show up with takeout and wouldn't ask her to talk, just sat with her until the worst of it passed. Adrian had his own moments. Nights when Emma would cry for her mother and he felt like he was drowning in his own inadequacy. Times when work demanded everything and he snapped at people who didn't deserve it. Clara never flinched from any of it. She'd let him vent, let him be angry, and then quietly remind him that being human wasn't a failure. By November, Clara had found a job, administrative work at a dental office. Nothing glamorous but steady with benefits. She moved out of Kelly's apartment and into a small one-bedroom across town. Adrian helped her move, along with Margaret and the Morrison kids, who treated furniture moving like an Olympic sport. "This is really happening," Clara said, standing in her empty new living room surrounded by boxes. "What is?" "Life, regular life. I'm working. I have my own place. I'm dating someone who—" She paused, looking at him. "Someone who makes me want to try again." Adrian set down the box he'd been holding and crossed to her. "You make me want to try again, too." They kissed, surrounded by cardboard and packing paper, and it felt like a promise neither of them was quite ready to name. Emma loved Clara. That was the easy part. She'd appointed herself Clara's official tour guide to single parenthood wisdom, offering advice like, "Sometimes Daddy forgets to buy groceries, so you have to remind him," and "He pretends he doesn't like animated movies, but he totally cries at the sad parts." "I do not cry," Adrian protested during one of these debriefings. "You cried at Coco. That movie is specifically designed to make grown men cry. It doesn't count." Clara laughed, and Emma high-fived her, and Adrian realized his daughter had been waiting for this, for someone else in their small family unit, someone who made the house feel less empty. But not everyone was thrilled about the relationship. Adrian's father, Richard Vaughn, had opinions. Many opinions. He'd been calling with increasing frequency, ostensibly about business, but really about Clara. "So this woman you're seeing," Richard said during a call in early December, "Kelly's cousin, the teacher who lost her job. She didn't lose her job. There were budget cuts." Adrian kept his voice even, though his grip on the phone was tight enough to hurt. "Right. And she's living on what, minimum wage at a dental office?" "That's not your concern, Dad." "It becomes my concern when my son, who happens to be worth over $1 billion, starts dating someone who might have financial motivations." Adrian closed his eyes, counting to 10. "Claire is not interested in my money." "Everyone's interested in money, Adrian, especially people who don't have it." "You don't know her." "I don't need to. I've seen this pattern before. Struggling woman meets successful man, suddenly her problems start solving themselves. It's a tale as old as time. We're done with this conversation." "Adrian, I said we're done." He hung up, then immediately felt guilty. His father had built the foundation that allowed Adrian to build his empire. Richard Vaughn was calculating and cold, but he'd also taught Adrian everything about business, about survival, about protecting what you built. But this wasn't business. This was his life. The guilt didn't last long because Emma chose that moment to appear in his office doorway. Was that Grandpa? Yeah. Was he being mean about Clara again? Adrian sighed. Emma had overheard one too many of these calls. He's just worried. He's being a jerk. Clara's nice. She doesn't care about money. I know, sweetheart. You should tell Grandpa that. I did. He doesn't listen very well. Emma crossed her arms, looking remarkably like Sarah when she was annoyed. Then maybe we don't listen to him either. Out of the mouths of babes. But Richard wasn't the only source of friction. Adrian's business partners had started noticing Clara's presence at company events. Nothing major, a holiday party, a charity dinner where Emma had insisted Clara come because it's boring when it's just us. But in their world, being seen together meant something. The whispers started small. Adrian caught fragments of conversations at the office, saw the way certain people looked at Clara when she visited. Patricia tried to warn him. There's talk, she said carefully one afternoon, about you and Clara. Some of the board members are asking questions. What kind of questions? The kind that aren't really about her, if you know what I mean. They're worried about optics, about whether this relationship affects your judgment. That's insane. My personal life has nothing to do with how I run this company. I know that. You know that. But perception matters, Adrian, especially when you're dealing with investors who are already nervous about the Denver situation. The Denver situation had been dragging on for months, a project that was hemorrhaging money due to contractor disputes and permit delays. The board was getting restless, profits were down, and Adrian's decision to take time off for Emma's school events and dates with Clara wasn't helping his case. Let them talk, Adrian said, though the words felt hollow. But the talk got louder. In January, someone leaked a photo to a local business blog, Adrian and Clara at Smokies, holding hands across the table. The headline read, Billionaire Adrian Vaughn's Mystery Woman, From Riches to Romance? The article was mostly harmless, but it dredged up everything. Clara's divorce, her daughter's death, her current employment at a dental office. It didn't say anything explicitly cruel, but the implications were clear. What was a billionaire doing with someone so ordinary? Clara called him after she saw it. Her voice was shaking. Adrian, I'm so sorry. Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything. I knew this would happen eventually. I just thought we'd have more time before people started dissecting my life. Clara, they found the accident report about Lily. It's all there, on the internet, for everyone to read. She was crying now. Some stranger in the comments section just wrote about how my daughter died like it was gossip, like it was entertainment. Adrian felt rage burn through him, hot and immediate. Give me a name. I'll have my lawyers... No, that just makes it worse. Trust me. She took a shaky breath. I knew dating you would come with attention. I thought I could handle it. But seeing her name, seeing people talk about her like she was just a detail in my tragic backstory. Where are you? Home. I'm fine. I'm coming over. He was there in 15 minutes, found Clara on her couch surrounded by used tissues, laptop open to the article and its poisonous comments section. Adrian closed the laptop. Stop reading that garbage. I can't help it. It's like watching a car crash. Clara, look at me. He waited until she did. Those people don't know you. They don't know us. They're strangers throwing opinions into the void because it makes them feel important. But they're not wrong, are they? I am ordinary. I do work at a dental office. My life is a mess compared to yours. Your life isn't a mess. You're surviving. You're rebuilding. That takes more strength than most of those keyboard warriors will ever have. Adrian, be realistic. Your business partners already think I'm a liability. Your father thinks I'm a gold digger. What happens when this gets worse? It won't. Yes, it will. Because this is your world, and I don't fit in it. We both know that. Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. Are you breaking up with me? No, I'm just... Clara wiped her eyes. I'm scared. What if your father's right? What if I am holding you back? You're not. How do you know? Because the only time I feel like myself anymore is when I'm with you. The words came out raw, more honest than he'd intended. Work is just work. It pays the bills, keeps people employed, but it doesn't make me happy. Emma makes me happy. You make me happy. Everything else is just noise. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You really believe that? I really do. She leaned into him, and he held her while she cried out the last of it, the fear and shame and exhaustion of being exposed. When she was done, they ordered Chinese food and watched terrible reality TV and didn't talk about articles or comments or other people's opinions. But the damage was done. Adrian noticed it over the next few weeks, the way Clara tensed when they went out in public. How she'd declined his invitation to a company gala in February, claiming she had to work even though he knew she'd requested that day off. The way she'd started pulling back, just slightly, like she was preparing for the inevitable. It all came to a head in March. Adrian had been invited to the Riverside Business Alliance annual charity gala, a massive black tie event that raised money for various local causes and functioned mostly as an excuse for the wealthy to network and be seen. He'd gone every year since starting his company, usually solo, always bored out of his mind. This year, he'd asked Clara to come with him. She'd said no. Then yes, then no again. Finally, after Emma had literally begged her to go because Daddy needs someone to keep him from talking about building codes all night, Clara had reluctantly agreed. The gala was held at the Riverside Grand Hotel, a historic property Adrian's company had actually renovated 5 years earlier. The ballroom was all crystal chandeliers and marble floors, filled with the city's elite in tuxedos and designer gowns. Clara arrived looking beautiful and absolutely terrified in a simple black dress that she'd borrowed from Kelly. No jewelry except the small silver earrings she always wore. She'd done her makeup carefully, but Adrian could see the tension around her eyes. You look amazing, he said when she met him at the entrance. I look like I'm playing dress up, she tugged at the dress. Everyone else is wearing things that cost more than my rent. Nobody's looking at what you're wearing. They're looking at you. That's not comforting, Adrian. He took her hand, felt it trembling slightly. We don't have to stay long. Show our faces. Make the donation. Leave. Your father's here, Clara said quietly, nodding toward the bar where Richard Vaughn held court with several board members. Ignore him. Hard to ignore someone who's been staring at me like I killed his dog since we walked in. Adrian glanced over. Sure enough, Richard was watching them with an expression that could freeze fire. He'll get over it. But as the evening progressed, it became clear that Richard wasn't the only problem. Adrian introduced Clara to business partners, investors, colleagues he'd worked with for years. Most were polite, if coolly distant. Some made an effort to include her in conversation before drifting away to talk business, and some were just cruel. It started with Marcus Pemberton, a real estate investor who'd made his fortune in the 80s and never let anyone forget it. He'd had too much to drink and apparently too little sense when he cornered them by the dessert table. So you're the famous Clara, he said, voice loud enough that nearby conversations paused. Adrian's been keeping you quite hidden. We've been keeping things low-key, Adrian said evenly. I can see why. Marcus looked Clara up and down with undisguised disdain. No offense, sweetheart, but you're not exactly what we expected. Clara's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. What did you expect? Someone more suitable. But I suppose love is blind, right? He laughed, and several people nearby joined in uncomfortably. Adrian felt his temper snap. That's enough, Marcus. Oh, come on. I'm just making an observation. You're a billionaire, Adrian. You could have anyone. Why slum it with... Finish that sentence and you'll regret it. Marcus held up his hands in mock surrender. Touchy. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Then everyone's an asshole, Clara said quietly. The nearby conversation stopped entirely. Marcus's face turned red. Excuse me? You heard me. Clara's voice was stronger now, anger cutting through the fear. You don't know me. You don't know anything about my life or what I've been through or why Adrian and I are together. But you feel entitled to judge me because I don't have enough zeros in my bank account. So yeah, you're an asshole. For a moment, the entire section of the ballroom was silent. Then Marcus laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Well, at least she's got spirit. You'll need it, sweetheart, when you're signing that prenup. Adrian stepped between them. Walk away, Marcus. Now. Or what? You'll sue me? I'm shaking. But Marcus did walk away, muttering something about gold diggers and poor judgment. Clara was shaking. Adrian could feel it when he touched her arm. You okay? I need air. They made it to the balcony before Clara fell apart. Not crying, just shaking with rage and humiliation and everything she'd been holding back. I shouldn't have said that, she said. I just made everything worse. You stood up for yourself. That's not making it worse. Adrian, these are your colleagues, your business partners. I just called one of them an asshole in front of half the city's elite. He deserved it. That's not the point. Clara turned to face him. Don't you see? I don't belong here. I can't play these games. I don't know how to smile and nod when someone insults me to my face. I'm not built for your world. I don't want you to be. I love you exactly as you are. The words hung in the air between them. Adrian hadn't planned to say it, hadn't meant to blurt it out on a hotel balcony while Clara was in the middle of a breakdown. But it was true. Clara stared at him. What? I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been for a while now. Adrian ran his hands through his hair, frustrated with himself. This isn't how I wanted to tell you. I had this whole plan. Dinner, maybe a weekend trip, somewhere romantic, where you weren't actively upset. But I can't watch you tear yourself apart over what those people think, and not tell you that their opinions don't matter. You matter. Emma and I, we love you. Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. Adrian, you don't have to say it back. I know it's fast. I know we're both still dealing with our pasts. But I need you to know that you're not just someone I'm dating. You're family. You have been since that first barbecue when you let Emma talk your ear off about dinosaurs. Clara was crying harder now, and Adrian couldn't tell if that was good or bad. Say something, he pleaded. I love you too, Clara whispered. I'm terrified, and I don't know how we make this work, but I love you too. Adrian pulled her close, and they stood there on the balcony while the gala continued inside. Music and laughter, and people who didn't matter nearly as much as this moment. When they finally composed themselves and went back inside, Richard was waiting. We need to talk, he said to Adrian, barely acknowledging Clara. Privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Clara. Richard's jaw tightened. Fine. The board is concerned. This relationship is becoming a distraction. Your focus should be on the Denver situation, on securing the Portland contracts, not on... He gestured vaguely at Clara. This has a name, Adrian said coldly, and she's standing right here. I'm aware. Miss Bennett, nothing personal, but you're affecting my son's business decisions. He's turned down 3 major opportunities in the last 2 months because they conflicted with personal obligations. Those were Emma's school events, Adrian said. I'm not missing my daughter's life for a contract negotiation. You didn't used to. Before her. Richard pointed at Clara. Before her, I was going through the motions, building a company but barely living. Is that what you want? For me to go back to that? I want you to be smart, strategic. This company is your legacy. Don't throw it away for what, Dad? For love? For happiness? For actually having a life? For someone who clearly doesn't understand your world. Clara had been silent through all of this, but now she spoke up. You're right. I don't understand his world. I don't understand how people can have so much and still want more. I don't understand how business partners can matter more than family. I don't understand how you can look at your son, who's been drowning in grief for 3 years, and tell him he's making a mistake because he finally found someone who makes him happy. Richard's expression was ice. You think you make him happy? Give it time. The novelty will wear off. The reality of what you can't provide will set in. And when his company suffers because he's too distracted playing house with you, we'll see how happy everyone is. That's enough. Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. You don't talk to her like that. You don't talk about our relationship like it's a liability. And if the board has a problem with my personal life affecting my business decisions, they can take it up with me directly. They will. At the next meeting, which by the way is Tuesday, prepare for some hard questions. Richard walked away, leaving Adrian and Clara standing in the middle of the ballroom while curious eyes watched from every direction. We should go, Clara said quietly. Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to stay and prove to everyone that he didn't care what they thought, but Clara looked exhausted, and he was tired of fighting. They left the gala early, driving home in silence. When Adrian pulled up to Clara's apartment, she didn't immediately get out. I'm sorry, she said finally. For what? For making things complicated. For not being what your father wants. For calling Marcus Pemberton an asshole even though he totally was one. Adrian laughed despite everything. Don't apologize for that. That was the highlight of my evening. Your father's going to make trouble. Let him. The board can ask all the hard questions they want. I'll have answers. What if those answers aren't good enough? What if they're right that I'm a distraction? Clara, look at me. Adrian waited until she did. You're not a distraction. You're the reason I remember why I built this company in the first place. To provide for my family, to create something that matters. But the company isn't my family. You and Emma are. And if I have to choose between board approval and the people I love, it's not even a choice. You can't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Clara kissed him then, soft and desperate and scared. I love you, but I'm terrified this is all going to fall apart. Me too, Adrian admitted, but we'll figure it out. Together. She went inside and Adrian drove home feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. The board meeting on Tuesday, his father's disapproval, the whispers that would follow tonight's scene. But underneath all that was something else, something that felt like certainty. He loved Clara Bennett, completely, terrifyingly, without reservation, and whatever came next, he'd face it with her. When he got home, Emma was still awake, supposedly doing homework, but actually scrolling on her tablet. How was the party? She asked. Complicated. Did people say mean things about Clara? Adrian sat on the edge of her bed. Some people did, but Clara stood up for herself. Good. She should. People are jerks. Emma set down her tablet. Are you going to marry her? The question caught Adrian off guard. What? Clara. Are you going to marry her? Because I think you should. We've only been dating a few months, Em. So? You love her. She loves us. That's what matters, right? It's more complicated than that. Why? Because Grandpa doesn't like her? Grandpa doesn't like anyone. Adrian couldn't argue with that. What if it doesn't work out? What if we try and it falls apart and you get hurt? Emma looked at him with Sarah's eyes and Sarah's wisdom. Daddy, I already lost Mom. I know things can fall apart, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. Clara's worth trying for. Adrian felt his throat tighten. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't listen. He hugged his daughter close, grateful for her clarity in a world that felt increasingly complicated. Tuesday came too fast. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as Adrian expected. They questioned his focus, his priorities, his judgment, brought up the Denver losses, the Portland delays, the opportunities he'd declined. And underneath all the business concerns was the unspoken issue, Clara. Adrian defended himself, defended his decisions, and when it was clear that talking wouldn't change their minds, he made a choice. If you want my resignation, say so now. Otherwise, you're stuck with me, personal life and all. The room went silent. Richard looked like he'd been slapped. You're not serious, one of the board members said. Completely serious. I built this company from nothing. I've made you all very wealthy in the process. But if you can't separate my personal life from my professional competence, then maybe we're not a good fit anymore. They backed down. Of course they did. Adrian was too valuable to lose, even with his supposed distractions, but the victory felt hollow. That evening, Adrian took Clara to Smokey's, their place, where everything had started. They backed down, he told her over burgers and terrible coffee. That's good, right? It's temporary. They'll keep pushing until I prove them wrong about you being a distraction. Clara set down her burger. What if they're not wrong? Don't. Adrian, listen. I love you. I love Emma, but I can't be the reason you lose everything you've built. Your father's right about one thing. Your company is your legacy. You're my legacy too. You and Emma, the family we're building. But what if we can't build it? What if the pressure breaks us? Adrian reached across the table, took her hand. Then we break. But I'd rather break trying than give up because we're scared. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I'm so scared. Me too. But I'm more scared of losing you. They sat there in Smokey's, holding hands across a table sticky with ketchup, making promises neither of them was sure they could keep. But sometimes that's all love is. Two terrified people deciding that together is worth the risk. The weeks following the gala were tense in ways that had nothing to do with board meetings or business partners. The real pressure came from the quiet moments, Clara second-guessing herself when she caught Adrian working late into the night on Denver contracts. Adrian watching Clara force smiles at company events while people whispered behind her back, both of them pretending the weight of expectation wasn't slowly crushing them. Emma noticed. Kids always did. "You and Clara had a fight," she announced one morning in April while Adrian was making breakfast. "We didn't fight. You're doing that thing where you're extra polite to each other. That's worse than fighting." Emma poured herself orange juice with the authority of someone who'd solved this problem before. "Mom used to do that too. Before she got sick. You'd be all, 'Yes, dear,' and, 'Of course, sweetheart,' instead of just talking normal." Adrian flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. "Clara and I are fine." "You're lying. You get this little wrinkle right here when you lie." Emma pointed to the space between his eyebrows. "See? There it is." "When did you become a detective?" "I'm observant. It's my thing." She took a bite of the pancake he'd just plated. "You should just tell her you're scared. That's what Mom always said. Don't hide the scared parts. Those are the parts that matter." Adrian looked at his 8-year-old daughter, who somehow contained more wisdom than most adults he knew. "You really think that would help?" "I think pretending everything's fine when it's not is dumb. And you're not usually dumb, Daddy." So that evening, after Emma was in bed, Adrian drove to Clara's apartment without calling first. She answered the door in pajamas, hair wet from the shower, looking exhausted. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." Adrian stepped inside her tiny living room, which still smelled like the lavender candles she burned to cover the apartment's persistent mustiness. "I'm scared, Clara." "Of what?" "That we're breaking under this. That trying to make us work is just dragging out the inevitable." He sat on her second-hand couch. "My father called again today. The board's pushing for me to focus exclusively on the Portland expansion, which means basically living there for the next 6 months. And I'm supposed to choose between that and me." Clara sat beside him, pulling her knees to her chest. "You should go." "What?" "To Portland. That's your company, Adrian, your legacy. I can't be the reason you don't do what you're supposed to do." "But Emma will understand. She's tougher than you think." Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "And I'll still be here when you get back. We can do long distance for a while. Figure things out." Adrian stared at her. "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. This is practical. This is smart." "No, it's you protecting yourself, getting ready to let go before I do it first." Adrian took her hand. "Clara, look at me. I didn't come here to break up. I came here because Emma told me I was being dumb." Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. "She said that? And she said I needed to stop pretending everything was fine and just tell you I'm scared. So that's what I'm doing. I'm terrified that my world is too much for you, that eventually the pressure will break us apart, that loving me means signing up for a lifetime of scrutiny and judgment from people who don't matter but somehow still get a vote." "I'm scared of the same things," Clara whispered, "but I'm more scared of being without you, of going back to that apartment where I was just existing, not living. You and Emma, you made me want to be alive again." "Then we don't let them win. The board, my father, everyone who thinks we're a mistake. We prove them wrong." "How?" Adrian didn't have an answer. Not yet. But that night, lying on Clara's couch with her head on his chest and terrible late-night TV playing in the background, he made a decision. He wasn't going to Portland. The next morning, Adrian called an emergency board meeting. Patricia looked at him like he'd lost his mind when he told her what he planned to do. "You're going to what?" "Step back. Appoint Harrison as acting CEO for the Portland project. I'll maintain oversight, but I'm not relocating for 6 months. Adrian, they'll see this as weakness, as choosing personal life over business. Then they'll see it accurately." He was calm, eerily so. "I spent 3 years building this company while neglecting my family. Sarah understood, or at least she said she did, but I know it hurt her. I missed dinners, bedtimes, entire weekends because there was always another crisis, another deal, another emergency. And then she got sick, and suddenly all those things I thought were so important became completely meaningless. This is different. Sarah would want me to be happy, to be present for Emma, to not make the same mistakes twice." Adrian met Patricia's eyes. "I love Clara. I'm going to marry her if she'll have me. And I'm not going to spend the next 6 months in Portland missing Emma's childhood and making Clara wonder if she's worth it. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. The board's going to push back hard. Let them. The meeting was exactly as brutal as expected. Richard led the charge, backed by 3 other board members who questioned Adrian's commitment, his judgment, his fitness to lead. You're choosing a woman you've known for 6 months over a $100 million expansion, Richard said, disgust evident in every word. Do you hear yourself? I'm choosing my family over being physically present for every single business decision. Harrison is more than capable of managing Portland. I'll be involved in all major decisions remotely. This isn't abandonment, it's delegation. It's weakness, Marcus Pemberton said from the end of the table. He'd apparently forgiven Adrian enough to show up to the meeting. Your competitors are going to see this as a sign you're losing your edge. Then they'll underestimate me. That's their problem. The arguments went in circles for 2 hours. Finally, Adrian stood. Here's what's going to happen. I'm restructuring my role to allow for remote oversight of Portland while maintaining my presence here. If the board wants to vote me out over this, call the vote now. Otherwise, this discussion is over. Silence. No one called for a vote. Adrian walked out of that meeting feeling lighter than he had in months. He'd drawn his line in the sand. Whatever happened next, at least he'd stood for something that mattered. He called Clara from the car. Are you free tonight? I have to work until 6, but after that, yeah. Why? Because I need to ask you something important, and I don't want to wait. Her breath caught. Adrian, just meet me at Smokey's at 7, please. He hung up before she could ask questions, then made 2 more calls, one to Emma's school to arrange early pickup, one to Margaret to ask a favor he'd never asked before. By 6:30, Adrian was sitting in a booth at Smokey's with Emma beside him, both of them nervous for entirely different reasons. What if she says no? Emma asked for the 5th time. Then she says no, and we'll deal with it. But you really want her to say yes, right? More than anything. Then she'll say yes. Clara's smart. Emma paused. You did bring a ring, right? Because Sophia's sister says you need a ring. Adrian pulled the small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was Sarah's engagement ring, a simple diamond on a white gold band. He'd thought about buying something new, something that was just for Clara, but this felt right. A way of including Sarah in this next chapter, of honoring what came before while building what came next. That was Mom's, Emma said softly. Yeah, is that okay? I can get a different one if... No, it's perfect. Emma touched the box gently. Mom would like Clara. I think they would have been friends. Adrian's throat tightened. Me too, sweetheart. Clara arrived at 7:03, rushed and apologetic, still wearing her scrubs from work. She stopped when she saw both of them in the booth. What's going on? Sit down, Adrian said. Please. Clara slid into the booth across from them, looking between Adrian and Emma with growing concern. You're scaring me. Did something happen? Is everyone okay? Everyone's fine. Better than fine. Adrian took a breath. Emma gave him an encouraging nod. Clara, I spent 3 years after Sarah died just going through the motions. Working because that's what I knew how to do, raising Emma because I had to, but not really living. And then I met you at a barbecue, and you were trying so hard to be invisible, and I couldn't look away. Adrian, let me finish. Please. He reached across the table, took her hand. You walked into my life when I didn't know I needed anyone. You loved Emma without trying to replace her mother. You saw me, not the billionaire, not the success story, just me, and somehow that was enough. You made me want to be better, to be present, to actually live instead of just surviving. Clara's eyes were filling with tears. What are you doing? Something terrifying. Adrian pulled out the ring box, heard Clara's sharp intake of breath. I talked to the board today, told them I'm not relocating to Portland, that I'm restructuring so I can be here with you and Emma, building the life we want instead of the one everyone expects us to have. You can't just... I can, and I did, because you're worth it. This, us, is worth more than any expansion project or board approval. Adrian opened the box. This was Sarah's ring. Emma and I both think she'd want you to have it, if you'll take it. Clara Bennett, will you marry me? The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were watching, some with phones out recording the moment. Clara didn't seem to notice any of them. She was staring at the ring, tears streaming down her face. "I'm a mess," she whispered. "I work at a dental office. I have panic attacks in grocery stores sometimes. I cry at commercials. I'm not what people expect for you." "I don't want what people expect. I want you." "But your father doesn't get a vote. The board also doesn't get a vote." Adrian squeezed her hand. "The only vote that matters is yours and Emma's, but she already said yes." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I did. I voted yes months ago." Clara laughed through her tears, looking at Emma. "You're sure? You really want this?" "Clara, you're already family. This just makes it official." Emma's voice got quieter. "I know you're not trying to replace my mom. Nobody could. But I love you anyway. We both do." Clara was fully crying now, not even trying to hide it. "I love you both so much. You know that, right?" "So is that a yes?" Adrian's heart was hammering so hard he thought everyone could hear it. "Yes. It's a yes. It's absolutely a yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Adrian slipped the ring onto Clara's finger. It was slightly loose, would need resizing, but it fit well enough for now. Then he kissed her across the table while Emma made gagging noises and the other diners cheered. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. "I can't believe you just did that. I can't believe I waited this long." "What about your father? The board? They're going to lose their minds." "Probably, but that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, we celebrate." They ordered too much food, ate too little of it, and stayed at Smokey's until the staff started cleaning around them. Emma spent most of the meal planning the wedding. "Nothing too fancy, but there has to be good cake. And can I be the flower girl, or is that too babyish?" While Adrian and Clara just held hands and let the reality of it sink in. They were doing this. Actually doing this. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from excitement. Clara sat in the passenger seat, staring at the ring on her finger like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "Your father's going to disown you," she said quietly. "He won't. He'll complain, make everything difficult, but ultimately, he cares more about his legacy than his pride, and I'm his only son. Still, this isn't going to be easy." "Nothing worth having is." Adrian glanced at her. "Having second thoughts already?" "No, just preparing for the battle. We'll face it together." As predicted, Richard Vaughn's response to the engagement news was somewhere between volcanic eruption and ice age. He called Adrian at 7 a.m. the next morning, which was early even for Richard. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "Good morning to you too, Dad. Don't be flip. This woman, Clara, her name is Clara, and she's going to be your daughter-in-law, so you might want to start using it. She's using you for your money, your status, your resources. Can't you see that?" Adrian had expected this, had prepared for it, but it still stung. "No, Dad, I can't see that. What I see is someone who makes me happy, someone Emma loves, someone who's been through hell and came out stronger for it." "Stronger? She's working at a dental office, Adrian. She has nothing. She has us, and we have her. That's enough." Richard was silent for a long moment. "Your mother would be ashamed of you." That was a low blow, even for Richard. Adrian's mother had died when he was 16. Cancer, just like Sarah. She'd been kind where Richard was cold, warm where he was calculating. Adrian had spent his entire life trying to be more like her and less like his father. "No," Adrian said quietly. "Mom would be happy I found someone who makes me laugh again, who reminds me that there's more to life than quarterly earnings and market share. You're the one who's ashamed, Dad, but that says more about you than it does about me. If you go through with this, I am going through with it, and you can either be part of our lives or not, your choice." Adrian hung up before Richard could respond. The board was only slightly less dramatic. They called another meeting, this one explicitly about Adrian's recent personal decisions and their impact on company direction. Adrian went in prepared to fight, but found unexpected support from an unlikely source. Harrison Miles, the executive Adrian had tapped to lead the Portland expansion, stood up halfway through the meeting and cut off Marcus Pemberton mid-sentence. "With all due respects to everyone in this room, this is absurd." Harrison was 62, had been with the company since its early days. and had never once spoken up in a board meeting. Adrian's personal life has zero bearing on his ability to lead this company. If anything, the restructuring he's proposed makes sense from a business standpoint. I'm perfectly capable of managing Portland. Adrian maintains oversight. The company continues to grow. The only thing that's changed is that he's not physically relocating for 6 months. But the principle, Marcus started. The principle is that we hired Adrian to run a company, not to sacrifice his entire personal life on the altar of profit margins. Harrison looked around the table. I've watched this man build Vaughn Construction into what it is today. I've also watched him bury his wife, raise his daughter alone, and still show up every single day to make sure every one of us gets paid. If he's found someone who makes him happy, who are we to question that? The room went silent. Harrison sat down, looking mildly embarrassed by his outburst. Patricia, sitting next to Adrian, leaned over and whispered, I think I love Harrison. Adrian bit back a smile. Get in line. The meeting ended without any votes or ultimatums, just a grudging acceptance that maybe, possibly, Adrian's personal life wasn't actually destroying the company. Small victories. The wedding planning was chaos. Clara wanted something small and simple. Emma wanted something magical but not princessy because that's babyish. Margaret wanted to plan the entire thing and wouldn't take no for an answer. Adrian just wanted it to happen before anyone could change their minds. They compromised on a garden ceremony at Margaret's house in late June, with close friends and family only. No board members, no business partners, no one from Adrian's world who'd made Clara feel less than. The one sticking point was Richard. He's your father, Clara said 2 weeks before the wedding, when they were addressing invitations at Adrian's dining room table. He should be there. He doesn't want to be there. Have you actually asked him, or did you just assume? Adrian hadn't. The truth was, he'd been avoiding his father since the engagement, letting calls go to voicemail, keeping communication to terse emails about business matters. What if I ask and he says no? Adrian said quietly. Then at least you tried. Clara squeezed his hand. I know he's been terrible about this, about us, but he's still your dad, and someday Emma's going to ask about her grandfather, and I want you to be able to say you tried. So Adrian called. Richard answered on the third ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. We're getting married June 23rd, at 2 p.m., Margaret Henderson's house. Adrian had rehearsed this, kept it simple. I'd like you to be there. Silence. Then, why? Because you're my father. Because despite everything, I still want you in my life. And because I think if you actually gave Clara a chance, you'd see what I see. Which is what? Someone who's survived losing everything and still has the courage to try again. Someone who loves Emma like she's her own. Someone who makes me better. Adrian paused. Someone a lot like Mom, actually. Richard's breath caught. That's not fair. It's true. Mom believed in love, in family, in the things that mattered beyond balance sheets and board meetings. You used to believe in those things too before you forgot how. More silence, then quietly. What do I wear? Adrian felt something in his chest unknot. Just come, Dad. We'll figure out the rest. Richard showed up to the wedding in a suit, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the backyard decorations and folding chairs. But he showed up. The ceremony was simple. Clara wore a white dress that Kelly had helped her pick out. Nothing extravagant but perfect on her. Emma wore purple, her choice, and took her role as flower girl so seriously that she created a detailed spreadsheet of responsibilities. Adrian stood at the makeshift altar in Margaret's garden, surrounded by people who actually mattered, and watched Clara walk toward him. No fancy processional music, just acoustic guitar played by the Morrisons' teenage son. No long aisle, just a path through Margaret's vegetable garden. But it was perfect. The officiant was a friend of Margaret's, someone who kept the ceremony short and personal. When it came time for vows, Adrian had planned to use the traditional words. Instead, he spoke from his heart. Clara, 3 years ago I thought my life was over, that I'd just exist until Emma was grown, then figure out what came next. You taught me that life doesn't end with grief, that it's okay to be broken and still want to be whole. That love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone who's willing to be imperfect with you. His voice cracked. You make me want to be present, to be better, to actually live. And I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you're loved. Not for what you survived, but for who you are. Clara was crying before he finished. Her own vows were simpler. Adrian, you saw me when I was trying to be invisible. You made me feel like I mattered when I thought I never would again. You and Emma, you gave me a reason to wake up in the morning, to try again, to believe that maybe happiness wasn't something that happened to other people. She looked at Emma, standing beside them with the rings. I can't promise I won't have hard days. I can't promise I'll always be strong, but I promise to love you both with everything I have, to show up, to be honest about the scared parts, to build a family that honors what we've lost while celebrating what we've found. Emma was crying too. Half the guests were crying. When the officiant pronounced them married, the cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 blocks away. The reception was potluck. Everyone brought dishes. Margaret supervised the setup like a military general, and someone had strung lights through the trees that would look magical once the sun set. It was nothing like the fancy weddings Adrian had attended over the years, where every detail was professionally managed and everything cost a fortune. It was better. Richard stayed at the edges of the reception, looking uncomfortable but present. Adrian caught him watching Clara laugh with Kelly and Margaret, saw something shift in his father's expression. She's not what I expected, Richard said when Adrian approached with 2 beers. In what way? She's tougher than she looks. The way she handled the Pemberton situation at the gala, most people would have crumbled. She called him an asshole to his face. Richard almost smiled. Your mother would have liked her. It was the closest thing to approval Adrian was going to get, and he'd take it. Thanks for coming, Dad. I'm still not convinced this isn't a mistake, but Richard paused, choosing words carefully. I'm willing to be proven wrong. Emma found them a few minutes later, dragging Clara along. Grandpa, you have to dance with Clara. It's tradition. I don't dance, Richard said automatically. You danced with Grandma. Daddy showed me pictures. Richard looked trapped. Clara, to her credit, just held out her hand. 1 dance, then you're off the hook. They swayed awkwardly to some slow song while Emma supervised and other guests pretended not to watch. Adrian couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw Richard's shoulders relax slightly, saw Clara say something that made him almost smile. Small victories, but they counted. The reception lasted until well past dark. Emma fell asleep on a blanket under the lights, worn out from dancing and cake and general excitement. Adults drifted into smaller groups, talking and laughing, while Margaret's neighbor's band played covers of 80s hits with varying degrees of accuracy. Adrian found Clara standing at the edge of the yard, looking out at the celebration with an expression he couldn't quite read. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Just taking it in, this is real. We actually did this. Having regrets already? Not even a little. She turned to face him. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. But it hasn't. Everyone's here. Everyone's happy. Even your father managed to be almost pleasant. Almost being the key word. It's progress. Clara rested her head against his chest. Adrian, what if I'm not good at this? At being married to you? At being a stepmother to Emma? Then you'll figure it out as you go. Same as me. He kissed the top of her head. We're both making this up, Clara. There's no manual for blended families or second chances or any of this. We just show up and try our best. That's terrifying. Yeah, but we're terrified together. They stood there while the party continued around them, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their old lives and decided to build something new. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be hard days ahead. Board meetings that required Adrian's focus, Clara's panic attacks in crowded places, Emma's grief ambushing her at unexpected moments. They'd argue about money and schedules and whose turn it was to handle the school pickup. They'd navigate the complicated dynamics of being a family that was built from pieces rather than whole cloth. But they'd do it together. 6 months later, Clara was standing in Adrian's kitchen, their kitchen now, making breakfast while Emma did homework at the counter. The early morning sun streamed through windows that overlooked the backyard where everything had started. Dad's burning the eggs again, Emma announced without looking up from her math. I am not burning them, Adrian protested from his position at the stove. I'm creating a nice char. That's what you said about the hamburgers. Clara laughed, and the sound filled the space that had felt empty for so long. She'd quit the dental office 2 months ago, started substitute teaching at Emma's school. It wasn't the same as having her own classroom, but it was a step back towards something that felt like herself. Adrian had successfully restructured his role at Vaughn Construction. Harrison had taken over most of the day-to-day operations, with Adrian maintaining strategic oversight and showing up for the decisions that actually required his input. The Portland project was ahead of schedule and under budget, proving that maybe delegating wasn't the same as abandoning ship. Richard called once a week now, ostensibly to check on business matters, but really to talk to Emma about school. He'd even invited them to dinner twice, though the meals were still awkward enough that everyone was relieved when they ended. Progress, not perfection. "I have a field trip next week," Emma said, still focused on her homework. "To the Natural History Museum. They have this new dinosaur exhibit, and we need parent chaperones." "I can do it," Clara said automatically. "Really? Because Sophia's mom always volunteers, and she's super annoying about the rules." "I promise to be only moderately annoying about the rules." Emma grinned. "Perfect." Adrian watched this exchange, his wife and daughter planning a field trip like it was the most natural thing in the world, and felt something settle in his chest. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of joy alongside it. That evening, after Emma was asleep and they'd cleaned up from dinner, Adrian found Clara on the back porch where they'd had so many conversations over the past year. She was wrapped in one of his old sweatshirts, holding a cup of tea, looking out at the yard. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Just thinking about Lily, what she'd be now. Whether she'd like dinosaurs like Emma or if she'd have moved on to something else. It still hurt her to talk about Lily. Probably always would. But the pain had softened around the edges, become something she could hold without it cutting her. You think she'd approve? Of us? I think she'd love Emma. They would have been friends." Clara smiled, sad but genuine. "And she'd probably roll her eyes at how sappy we are, but yeah, she'd approve." They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies start their evening dance across the lawn. In the distance, someone was mowing their grass despite the late hour. A dog barked, normal suburban sounds that had become the soundtrack of their life. "I'm happy," Clara said suddenly. "Is that okay? Am I allowed to be this happy when Lily's gone?" "Yes, Clara, you're allowed to be happy. Being happy doesn't mean you've forgotten her or stopped loving her. It just means you're living." "I know. It just feels weird sometimes, like I'm betraying her memory by moving on." "You're not moving on. You're moving forward. There's a difference." Adrian took her hand, felt the ring there that had been Sarah's and was now Clara's. "Sarah used to tell me that love doesn't run out, that loving someone new doesn't diminish what came before. I didn't believe her then. I do now." Clara squeezed his hand. "Thank you for understanding the messy parts, for not expecting me to be over it." "Thank you for the same thing." They went inside eventually, checked on Emma, who was sleeping with her stuffed triceratops and a book about space exploration. They got ready for bed with the easy routine of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. And they lay in the dark, talking about nothing important. Emma's upcoming science project, whether they should finally get that dog, what to make for dinner tomorrow. Ordinary conversations, ordinary moments. But to Adrian and Clara, who'd both spent years in the dark wondering if they'd ever feel alive again, ordinary was extraordinary. In the months and years that followed, life happened in all its messy, complicated, beautiful glory. Emma grew up, started middle school, developed a passion for astronomy that rivaled her dinosaur phase. Clara went back to teaching full-time, found joy in a classroom full of third graders who needed her patience and understanding. Adrian learned to delegate more, be present more, worry less about what the board thought, and more about whether he was showing up for the people who actually mattered. They had fights, real ones, not just disagreements. About money. Clara felt guilty spending Adrian's wealth. Adrian felt guilty that she felt guilty. About Emma. How much independence to give her, what battles to fight with the school, whether she was old enough for a phone. About the past. Nights when Clara's grief blindsided her. Days when Adrian got lost in work because that's what he knew how to do. But they worked through it. Sometimes with shouting, sometimes with tears, sometimes with the help of the couple's therapist. They started seeing when things got particularly rough. They celebrated victories. Emma's first A in math, which she'd always struggled with. Clara's first parent-teacher conference, where a student's parent thanked her for believing in their kid. Adrian's successful launch of a green building initiative that cut costs and reduced environmental impact. They survived tragedies. Richard had a heart attack 2 years after the wedding, survived it, but it scared everyone enough that he actually started trying to be less of a jerk. Kelly got divorced, moved in with Clara and Adrian for 3 months while she got back on her feet. Margaret's husband died, and the whole neighborhood came together to support her. Through all of it, they showed up for each other. And on a warm summer evening, 5 years after that first barbecue, Adrian stood at the same grill where everything had started. Once again, burning hamburgers while Emma, now 13 and way too cool for family parties, but here anyway, complained about his technique. "Daddy, you're literally doing the same thing you did 5 years ago." It's tradition at this point. It's a fire hazard. Clara appeared at his elbow with a beer and a kiss on the cheek. "The guests are starting to arrive. Should I warn them about the burgers?" "My burgers are fine." "Your burgers are carbon. You two are ganging up on me." "Because we love you," Clara said, and even after 5 years of marriage, the words still made Adrian's chest warm. The backyard filled with familiar faces, Margaret and Kelly, the Morrisons, neighbors who'd become friends, but also new faces, Clara's students and their parents, colleagues from Adrian's company who'd proven themselves worth knowing outside conference rooms, friends they'd made together in this life they'd built. Emma had invited her own friends, teenage girls who spent most of the party taking pictures and ignoring the adults. But she still found time to check in with Clara, to steal a burger from Adrian's grill, to roll her eyes when Margaret asked if she had a boyfriend yet. She was growing up, they all were. Later, after the party wound down and Emma had disappeared to her room with her friends, Adrian and Clara found themselves in the same spot where they'd first really talked, the porch swing on a warm summer night. 5 years, Clara said. Can you believe it? Some days, yes. Some days it feels like we just met. Do you regret it? Restructuring your role, stepping back from the company? Adrian thought about it. Really thought about it. No, not even a little. The company's doing better than ever. Emma's happy. You're happy. That's what matters. Your father still thinks you made a mistake. My father thinks everyone makes mistakes. It's his default setting. Adrian pulled Clara closer. But he also came to Emma's science fair last week and actually seemed interested, so maybe there's hope. They rocked in comfortable silence, listening to teenage laughter from Emma's room, the sounds of neighbors settling in for the night, the particular piece of a life well lived. I love you, Clara said quietly. I know I say it all the time, but I need you to know I mean it, every single time. I know. I love you too. Adrian kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes, to all of it. The proposal, the mess, the complicated family dynamics, the burnt hamburgers. Especially the burnt hamburgers. They've really grown on me. Liar. Fine, but everything else is true. Inside, Emma's laughter carried through the open window. Margaret's car pulled out of the driveway with a friendly honk. The porch light next door flickered on, then off, then on again. The Morrisons really needed to fix that. Ordinary moments in an ordinary life. But Adrian had learned that ordinary was where the magic lived. Not in board meetings or business deals or the things that impress strangers. In Saturday morning pancakes and terrible school plays and porch swing conversations on summer nights. In loving imperfect people imperfectly and choosing them anyway. In showing up. That's what love was, he'd learned. Not the big dramatic gestures, though those had their place, but the daily choice to be present. To see someone's pain and sit with it. To celebrate their joy. To build a life together, one small moment at a time. Sarah had taught him how to love deeply. Clara had taught him how to love again. Emma had taught him why it mattered. And sitting on that porch swing with his wife, listening to his daughter laugh with her friends, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, Adrian Vaughn felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Complete. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. There would be hard days ahead. There always were. Emma would struggle with teenage angst. Clara would have moments when grief hit her sideways. Adrian would stress about quarterly reports and whether he was doing enough. But they'd face it together. And that, he thought, as fireflies began their dance across the darkening lawn, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.